Hogwarts, the first capitalist of the magical world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176, Turning Against Guests. Cedric looked at Cornelius Fudge with a bit of weirdness. Even though he was slow in interpersonal communication, he had also long understood from his communication with Karl what the other party was thinking, which was to use the rules to bring down the Minister of Magic. As a result, the person in front of him not only did not feel the coming of danger, but repeatedly reiterated the rationality of the other party's subsequent actions. It is truly a rare talent point. In order to live up to the other party's kindness, Cedric began his performance. Using the speech skills he had practiced hard in the past 2 days, he expressed it all at once and spoke it with great emotion. On that day, Voldemort and his dark wizards attacked Hogwarts and set the Forbidden Forest on fire. It caused the death of countless magical animals. It also killed several centaurs in front of everyone because of its evil black magic. I used their vitality to revive my dead teammates. The scene was extremely tense and dangerous. My classmates and I are in danger at all times, and we have ample witnesses to prove this. As soon as Cedric finished speaking, the group of Hogwarts teachers and students, led by Professor McGonagall, immediately stood up and shouted, "First of all, there are George and Fred, who love to join in the fun." George spoke first. "Yes, the situation was extremely dangerous at that time. I was holding the weapon that Mr. Hohenzollern gave me, like a fox on the battlefield. He shuttled between various bunkers, continuously pouring bullets at the dark wizards attacking Hogwarts. The movements are so clever and the standards are so precise. It's so handsome." Fred added, "Of course, with my perfect assistance, you can certainly do that." "Oh dear George, I have to admit that you were very handsome at that time, but you also have to admit that when I lowered my body in an instant, when the opponent's magic flew past my scalp, I looked much more handsome than you at that moment." The two brothers sang in unison, which brought back many memories of the little wizards, and they began to show off to each other their heroic actions on that day, even though these guys kept talking more and more outrageous. Like 800 meters away, the dog heads of the dark wizards who were shot to death by one shot all came out, and Professor McGonagall could only use a sharp look to calm these guys down. At the same time speaking, "Dear members of the Wizengamot Council Presidium, although the children's expressions were exaggerated, they did not lie. I can vouch for this with my reputation as a Hogwarts professor. The situation at the time was indeed extremely urgent. Mr. Hohenzollern himself was also attacked by Voldemort's killing curse. If it weren't for his phoenix, he may have lost his life at this moment. Although he used the unforgivable curse, it is extenuating. I hope the Presidium can make a fair judgment." After Professor McGonagall spoke, Cedric continued, "Dear members of Parliament, as my teachers and students have said, the situation was urgent. We are just using appropriate methods to protect our school and personal lives. Life is an inalienable right of every person. I think no one can object to this. I have finished my speech. Thank you. Life is everyone's inalienable right." After Cedric finished his speech, Old Crouch, the Attorney General, also spoke. "No one will deny this, but at the same time, no one in the British wizarding world can deny this. Avada Kedavra is known as the unforgivable curse. Any wizard who uses this curse will be sentenced to life imprisonment in Azkaban. No one can deny this." After hearing these words, the Hogwarts teachers and students, who had just spoken actively, and Cedric all fell silent. After a full minute, Cedric looked up at the three people on the podium and spoke in a strong tone. "But when a person's life is threatened, he must have the right to protect himself. We cannot watch our friends and classmates fall into danger. Even my client personally, he also has the right to seek emergency shelter, but the means he used were not appropriate. The means were not appropriate." Old Crouch's tone became tougher, and he said righteously, "Use the unforgivable curse to burn the 10 dark wizards and the resurrected Voldemort you mentioned to ashes. Can this kind of black magic be described as not quite appropriate. As he spoke, Old Crouch glanced secretly at Cornelius Fudge and saw the delighted expression on the other's face. I sneered in my heart, and I will make you fall from the top to the bottom in a moment. So he continued speaking righteously. No matter what, the use of the unforgivable curses is an indisputable fact. Even if the situation is critical, Hogwarts should also report to the British Ministry of Magic immediately. If everyone is as you say, if we use an appropriate magic to deal with the crisis, then why are we standing here today? Rules are above everything. Mr. Karl Hohenzollern. He is just an ordinary student and has no power to enforce the law. Using the killing curse to kill someone is unforgivable. As soon as Old Crouch finished speaking, the officials of the Ministry of Magic immediately began to applaud and cheer for the other side. Cornelius Fudge also wanted to applaud at this time, but due to his status, he could only wave his hands to signal the officials to be quiet. At the same time, he deliberately pretended to be quite regretful and looked at Karl in the audience. Mr. Hohenzollern, do you have anything else to say? When the sleepy Karl heard this, he turned his neck to relax and slowly looked up at the other person. His signature smirk appeared on his face. As soon as Cornelius Fudge saw that smile, he felt something was wrong, and the result was just as he expected. Karl paused for a second and then started to criticize without any hesitation. I have something to say. I want to tell you, and the bunch of rubbish behind you, that you are just a bunch of idiots. Don't eat the sour radish. How dare you? Before Cornelius Fudge could react, Old Crouch shouted first. Karl continued to rant angrily, following up on what the other party said. How dare I do this? Who gave me the courage? Is that what you want to ask? Then I'll tell you where my courage comes from. Where were you when my dear classmates were fighting desperately against Voldemort and his minions? Where were you when Voldemort cast the killing curse on me and tried to kill me? Where were you when the entire Hogwarts castle was crumbling? 3 consecutive questions made Cornelius Fudge speechless, but Karl's output was not over yet. He continued to rant. I just did everything I could to protect everything I held dear, and now I'm locked up here. I see you guys are so high up and saying some big bullshit. So very good, Mr. Barty Crouch. You just said that I have no law enforcement powers, but when danger comes, where are the Aurors who have those law enforcement powers? Don't tell me they were still sleeping at home. You actually admitted that the safety of Hogwarts is under the protection of the British Ministry of Magic. Very good then. As one of the directors of Hogwarts, I will now formally sue the British Ministry of Magic on behalf of the Hogwarts Board of Directors. If you want to convict me, you must compensate me for my losses first. Chapter 177 Backstage Arrival. Cornelius Fudge was a little dizzy after hearing Karl's words. He looked at the young man in the audience with some disbelief. He couldn't say a word for half a day, but fortunately, Old Claude was loyal and refuted it for him. Watch your words, Mr. Hohenzollern. This is a Wizengamot, the Muggle world's equivalent of a court. You openly swore in Parliament. Just for this, you could be sentenced to 6 months in prison. At the same time, I have to suspect that your purpose in saying this is to change the subject, especially the case being heard in Parliament today. It's about your use of the unforgivable curses, not about the Ministry of Magic's failures in its trial. At the same time, I would like to remind you that, if you really want to sue the Ministry of Magic, you must submit an application to the Supreme Council of the Wizengamot at least 48 hours in advance. This statement was well reasoned, and the atmosphere in the room temporarily turned to the Ministry of Magic's side, which temporarily curbed Karl's aura. Cornelius Fudge felt warm at heart after hearing this, and when he looked at Old Crouch, there was a look of gratitude and even a hint of apology in his eyes. Umbridge didn't think so. As the minister's chief secretary, this toad was still very sensitive about some issues. She immediately heard several problems in Old Crouch's words. First of all, the other party did not directly deny it. Mr. Hohenzollern, in accusing the British Ministry of Magic of its legality, was simply pointing out procedural problems on the other side. Secondly, if this guy really wants to help his side, he should bite him to death and use the unforgivable skill. They have repeatedly stressed the serious consequences, or have gone beyond their authority and directly asked the Presidium to give the trial results instead of just brushing it off with a few words. Give the other person a chance to catch their breath. So she quickly looked at Cornelius Fudge and said, "Minister, I think there is no point in arguing any further. This trial should not be delayed any longer, since the other party has admitted to using the unforgivable curse. Then we should hand this fact over to the Presidium for trial. Any further delay may be disadvantageous to us. I know, but just." Cornelius Fudge looked around the corners of the courtroom with lingering fear. It turned out to be around this whole point more than a dozen reporters were holding cameras and filming everything that was happening in the whole point. The strange devices in these people's hands were also invented by Mr. Hohenzollern, who is currently on trial. He called it a camera, which could use magic to transmit what was filmed in real time to a terminal called TV through a converter in order to achieve the effect of live broadcast. Cornelius Fudge wanted to use this new gadget to show off in front of the wizards in the British magical world. As a result, not only did he not get to show his face, but he actually lost face and put himself in a difficult position. Karl looked at Cornelius Fudge, whose face was as bitter as a melon, and just found it funny. He knew the reason why the other party fell into the trap he designed so easily. Or it was because the other party simply didn't think highly of him, no matter how much changes he had brought to the British wizarding world in this year. But in the eyes of these high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic, he was just like those talented wizards who suddenly emerged. You can become rich, but it doesn't change anything. The money you earn should be distributed to them honestly. If you don't give it, they will seize the opportunity like what is happening now, blackmail you severely, or even put you in jail. It was just like what he had experienced in the United States, even though he was the youngest billionaire in the United States after all. But in the eyes of the master of the stars and stripes in Washington, he was just an avo-rich who had suddenly risen. It's no big deal, as long as they use a little tricks and finish a bowl of noodles one day. And if they charge me for 2 bowls of noodles, I will obediently surrender to them. But these people have forgotten that this was before they became rich in the United States, or before they came to the magical world. What did I do before? As a kid who grew up in New York, I appear to be a capitalist. But his essence is that of a gangster and a hooligan. Or perhaps the two identities are just the same person in 2 sets of clothes. If they dare to charge me for 2 bowls of noodles, I will let these guys see what true shamelessness is. So Karl ignored old Crouch and continued, "Mr. Barty Crouch, what you just said to me is nothing but fart to my ears. Since I proposed this idea, I must have been prepared. I proposed it 3 days ago. 2 complaints have been filed with the Wizarding Council Presidium, one of which is what I just mentioned. The other is based on the provisions of the Wizarding Convention of the British Wizarding World. If any British wizard is found to have violated the discipline of the British Ministry of Magic, with the support of more than 10 people, you can submit an application for investigation to the Wizarding Council. Here is my complaint. The person being accused is also very simple. His name is Cornelius Fudge, the current Minister of Magic of the United Kingdom. What? Accuse Mr. Fudge? How dare he? What does he want to do? This has never happened in a century." As soon as Karl finished speaking, the entire Parliament Hall immediately became noisy, including the group of Ministry of Magic officials who were listening. They began to whisper to each other, and the surprise in their words filled the entire venue. Cornelius Fudge was completely stunned. He was getting nervous and cold sweat was pouring out of his forehead. Old Crouch remained calm and continued to ask questions like a robot, suing. "The Minister of Magic is no ordinary case. As far as I know, the presidency has never received your 2 complaints. Mr. Hohenzollern, you are now not only suspected of using the unforgivable curse, but also of slandering officials of the Ministry of Magic. Please stop this behavior immediately and don't." Old Crouch stopped talking halfway through his words, and at the same time, the conference hall, which had just been extremely noisy, became noisy. It was dead silent at the moment, and almost everyone's eyes were fixed on the entrance of the Parliament Hall. An old figure appeared there, walking slowly into the venue, and someone shouted loudly behind him, "Chief Wizard of the Wizengamot, President of the International Confederation of Wizards, First Class Order of Merlin, and Headmaster of Hogwarts, His Excellency Albus Dumbledore enters." Cornelius. Fudge looked at the old slender figure and the blue eyes hidden behind the half-moon glasses. His whole body felt like it had fallen into an ice cave, and his brain began to urgently recall everything that had happened in the past few days. Suddenly I felt that both myself and everyone present were like puppets, performing a drama according to a script. And the manipulator behind the scenes, could it be Dumbledore? That's not right. He thought about it carefully again, withdrew his gaze from Dumbledore, and looked at the blonde boy in the audience again. He saw that the other person was also looking up at him, without saying anything, but his lips moved slightly, as if he was saying something. My backstage has arrived. Chapter 178. Two-pole reversal. As soon as Dumbledore stepped into the meeting room, all the teachers and students of Hogwarts immediately smiled, thinking that this was a sure thing. Even Professor McGonagall, although still complaining, looked much more relaxed. On the other side, the Ministry of Magic officials had strange expressions on their faces, and their voices were not as restrained as before when they whispered to each other. The emotions and the tone were also more prominent. Principal Dumbledore, hasn't he been missing for many days? Why are you back at this time? There must be something wrong. Can't you see? Our minister, this time we will suffer the consequences. Beneath the gloating words was a change in people's hearts. Cornelius Fudge, who was sitting on the podium, just listened to the discussions. He already felt that things were not going well, and he had to take the initiative immediately to prevent things from getting out of control. Before he could say anything, old Crouch spoke first. Principal Dumbledore, what exactly brings you here? According to the rules, the meeting should start half an hour later. You are no longer qualified to participate in the voting in this trial. Please forgive my wording, but it seems that you should not be here. Faced with the questioning, Dumbledore did not say anything, but slowly walked to Karl's side and snorted coldly at the little bastard in front of everyone. For such an urgent matter, why don't you send someone to notify us? Of course I don't want to disturb your pleasure, Karl said without hesitation. It's better for you to enjoy this opportunity to be alone with me. As soon as these words were spoken, the whole place immediately started talking, not just the group of energetic students at Hogwarts. I began to wonder who my principal had been alone with during the time he was missing. Even the group of Ministry of Magic officials began to chat and eat melons. Ahem. Don't talk nonsense. Dumbledore coughed awkwardly, then waved his hand to signal everyone to be quiet. At the same time, he looked at old Crouch and changed the subject. Mr. Barty Crouch, I'm aware of the rules you just mentioned, so I'm not here today to participate in the vote in this trial. That was just submitting to complaints to the Presidium of the Wizengamot Council. As the Chief Mage of the Wizengamot, I received these 2 complaints 4 days ago, and have now formally submitted them to the Parliamentary Bureau. After saying this, Dumbledore took out 2 rolls of parchment sealed with wax from his robes. With a slight wave of his hand, 2 rolls of parchment flew directly onto the table in front of old Crouch. Umbridge and Cornelius Fudge on the platform looked at the wax seals written by Dumbledore himself on the 2 scrolls of parchment. Their faces darkened to the extreme. Old Crouch ignored the 2 guys at this time. He just opened the 2 pieces of parchment, read them carefully, and continued to ask questions. The seal and date above indicate that there is no problem with what you just said, but as today's prosecutor and deputy chief judge, in the spirit of accountability to Parliament, I must raise my doubts. If you had been there 4 days ago, why didn't you submit it to the Parliamentary Presidium for review today? The timing of your arrival today is really too coincidental. Please give a reasonable explanation. I've heard that Mr. Batty is upright and honest, but I didn't expect to see it with my own eyes today. That's right. That's Dumbledore. He dares to question like that. I Don't quite understand what this guy wants to do. Old Crouch's repeated questioning shocked the officials of the Ministry of Magic, and they began to talk about it again. Umbridge had a strange look on her face, while Cornelius Fudge's face was full of gratitude. Dumbledore just glanced at Karl beside him, but this bastard had an expression of "you decide" on his face. It was infuriating just by looking at it, and it reminded him of some bad memories, such as the experience of being manipulated by someone. In the past month, these two bastards, one old and one young, look like they are determined to get me. He really wanted to leave, but when he thought about the bastard's methods, he decided to cooperate with him. Otherwise, God knows what he would do. Thinking of this, Dumbledore was helpless and could only pretend to be apologetic and said, "Mr. Barty Crouch, I really appreciate your responsible attitude, but please also understand the helplessness of an old man. I forgot about this matter. As for why I came at this time today, it's just because I'm old and didn't wake up this morning." Almost everyone present had an open-mouthed, confused expression, staring at Dumbledore. Dumbledore, feeling all eyes focused on him, felt that he had completely lost face today. But even with such a ridiculous reason, Old Crouch could only nod in agreement. Even Cornelius Fudge and Umbridge didn't say another word. As for a reason, there is no need for one. If I have to give one, it is only because the other party is Albus Dumbledore. The old man's prestige in the British wizarding world was such that, even if he said, now that he was going on vacation with a lover, "I just forgot about this matter, and no one can blame me for anything." After a minute of dead silence, Old Crouch spoke again. "Okay, Headmaster Dumbledore, we are willing to trust your credibility. I accept these two complaints on behalf of the Parliament, but, as I just said, you can no longer participate in the trial vote, so please do not interfere with the trial." Mr. Hohenzollern used the unforgivable curse. This is an indisputable fact. He must pay the price for his actions, of course. Dumbledore nodded slightly, but then changed the subject, and looked at Cornelius Fudge on the podium. "I may not speak as the chief wizard of the Wizengamot, but I think I'm speaking as the headmaster of Hogwarts, as Mr. Karl Hohenzollern's guardian and adoptive father. I'm qualified to defend him. I think he is involved in this incident, although an unforgivable curse was used. The circumstances were special and the Wizengamot Council's ruling followed the principle of convention. I have formally applied to the conference to convene a general meeting of all wizards in the British wizarding community." In 1937, Smith's case of using the unforgivable curse was used as a blueprint. Reopen the case. "What? Guardian and adoptive father?" I said that Mr. Hohenzollern must have a deep background, but I didn't expect that his background was Headmaster Dumbledore. Adoptive father? That's not right. Look at their eyes. I'm afraid this is just a cover. Bullshit. Was Headmaster Dumbledore this handsome when he was young? Dumbledore's words completely set off the entire venue. Voices of discussion rose and fell, and Dumbledore's eyelids twitched wildly as he listened. "What are you talking about? When I was young, I was much more handsome than this bastard. How dare he question my appearance? It's simply unforgivable." But no matter what the old man thought, Old Crouch remained expressionless and banged the gavel beside him hard. Shouted loudly, "Everyone, please be quiet and maintain order in the venue." After that, he looked at Dumbledore and continued to ask, "The case in 1935, Headmaster Dumbledore, are you sure there was such a thing? Because of the mysterious man, some of the ministry's files are missing. I cannot verify what you say." Faced with doubts, Dumbledore said disdainfully, "Of course I'm 100% sure of that, for the simple reason that I was there during the trial." Chapter 179. The Trial Ends. Silence once again fell over the entire courtroom, and everyone looked at Dumbledore, who was standing next to Karl, with different eyes among them, the Presidium sitting at the highest seat, and the Ministry of Magic officials on the left. Most of them lowered their heads and covered their mouths, trying hard to hold back their laughter. They didn't even dare to look up at the expression on Cornelius Fudge's face. After all, they had all received professional training. I usually don't laugh in such a serious situation, unless I can't help it. Cornelius Fudge's face twitched so fast that Umbridge, who was standing beside him, became a little worried, fearing that her minister might have a stroke and pass out. Old Crouch's expression didn't change at all. His silent old face looked business-like. As for the teachers and students of Hogwarts, they were naturally full of admiration for their own headmaster. From the moment they entered the door, he completely controlled the rhythm in his own hands and was able to overturn the verdict, even by using the unforgivable curse. He was really too powerful. Among them, Cedric's eyes were full of stars. He had always admired Dumbledore very much, and today he was even more excited to see the headmaster's heroic figure. Karl is the only exception among all people, he said with some jealousy. It seems that living a long life is not necessarily a bad thing. In addition to consuming candy, you can also do some good things. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Dumbledore said angrily. From the way you sound, it seems like you wish I would die. If I die, what good will it do you? That's a lot of benefits. Karl smiled slightly. You and your brother are the only ones left in the Dumbledore family. According to the inheritance law, after you die, all your property will belong to me, and I can become the headmaster of Hogwarts one day earlier. You little bastard. If I had known, I wouldn't have come to save you. Dumbledore began to get angry. Karl, however, sat on the diorite, raised his head, and glanced at the other person. Of course you can choose not to show up today, as long as you are not afraid that Azkaban Castle will suddenly appear one day. You can choose not to come. If you are hit by a Muggle missile for no apparent reason, you just have to pay off all the debts you owe me, including all the expenses in the Muggle world over the past month. It seems like just yesterday, you guys booked a couple's suite at the Goring Hotel and ordered some red wine. The atmosphere was really good. I just don't know. Dumbledore quickly covered Karl's mouth, stared into the other's eyes, and asked in a low voice, "Aren't you in prison? How do you know this?" Karl smiled wickedly and spoke softly. "They can forbid me to use magic, but they forget that I could do many things before I learned magic. I spent a year showing these wizards the power of technology, but they still don't take it seriously. In this game, the winner and loser have been decided from the beginning. The result is already determined. Only the process will have ups and downs, so it doesn't matter whether you come here today or not. Your arrival only puts a perfect end to this performance, but it won't change anything." As he spoke, he raised his head slightly and looked at Cornelius Fudge, his face cold. Ignorance and weakness are not obstacles to survival, but arrogance is. Although the conversation between Karl and Dumbledore was very low, it was loud enough for everyone present to hear clearly. After hearing Karl's last words, all the wizards present once again chose to remain silent. Unlike the previous times, when the venue fell silent, this time the silence was very complete, and they were lost in self-reflection. No one was whispering anymore, and in the entire courtroom, only the sound of breathing was floating in the air. The gentle breeze blew away the time. After an unknown amount of time, Old Crouch, the deputy presiding judge, gently knocked the gavel beside his hand. He woke everyone up from their thoughts and announced softly, "This trial is temporarily adjourned. According to the law, we will wait for the discussion of the Supreme Council of the Wizengamot in 2 days. Announce again whether to follow the precedent just mentioned by Headmaster Dumbledore and convene a general meeting of British wizards. Public trial of Mr. Hohenzollern, using the unforgivable curse on the case. Now, please leave in an orderly manner." As soon as the words fell, everyone present stood up and prepared to leave without saying a word. The 4 international lawyers immediately came to Karl's side, ready to help him remove the restraints on his body. Perhaps what they didn't expect was that Karl refused with a smile. "Thank you, sir. I would like to be the last one to leave." "Okay." The 4 international lawyers looked at each other and calmly returned to their previous positions. After they left, Cedric suddenly took out a cigarette box, took out a cigarette from it, put it in his mouth, lit it and took a light puff. Then he coughed violently and handed the cigarette to Karl's mouth. "You are so thoughtful." Karl smiled with satisfaction and started puffing smoke from a cigarette. The white light shone vertically in the center of the entire courtroom, shining on the only teenager who was confined to his seat. The young man had a cigarette between his lips, white smoke covering his upper body, and his face could not be seen clearly under the reflection of the light. The first to leave were the officials from the Ministry of Magic. They lined up in an orderly manner, just like they had when they entered before, but just passed by Karl. Unlike before, when they bowed to Cornelius Fudge on the podium, this time each official passed by Karl. That brief pause may have been more like the true thoughts in his heart. The next to leave were the teachers and students of Hogwarts, who also slowly left under the leadership of Professor McGonagall. They are much more unrestrained and passionate than that group of officials. Some of them gathered around Cedric and joked, like George and Fred, who put their arms around Cedric's shoulders, one on each side. "You've been in the spotlight today, you annoying guy." "That's right, Mr. Hohenzollern is really good to you. This is the nth piece of clothing I've given you. Is it 10 pieces now?" "George, you underestimate the relationship between the two of them. There are already more than 20 cases of this happening in school, Fred." The two brothers sang in unison, making Cedric blush with laughter. Professor McGonagall glared at them both sternly, then looked at Karl and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Hohenzollern. Hogwarts will not forget what you have done. You are a good boy." "I believe this now." After Professor McGonagall, the other students either briefly greeted Karl or offered reassurances. "I will definitely tell my parents everything I saw today and ask them to vote for me at the Wizarding Conference." Karl just responded with a polite smile and used magic to block out the second-hand smoke around him. He is always gentle to his classmates. After the Hogwarts teachers and students left, Cornelius Fudge took Old Crouch and Umbridge away and quickly walked past Karl. There was no greeting or pause, just a moment of eye contact. The last to leave were Dumbledore and the old guys from the Presidium, who were chatting and laughing among themselves. It seemed that he didn't take today seriously at all. After everyone left, Karl asked for international lawyers to remove the restraints on him. He assured them that he would never run away and asked them to go out and wait for a minute. After the 4 international lawyers left, the entire courtroom was empty except for the reporters, who were still filming. Only Cedric and Karl were left. The two young men smiled at each other under the white light. Chapter 180 Reverse 37. Compensation. Cornelius Fudge's right hand, which was stretched out to take the wine, stopped in midair, and he looked at Cole with a dull expression. Carol didn't mean to explain, and just kept talking to himself. "Yes, compensation. I have made this very clear at the trial, since the British Ministry of Magic insists the safety of Hogwarts and its surrounding properties is protected by the British Ministry of Magic, which also has the right to manage Hogwarts. So, in that great war, the Forbidden Forest was burned, and the magical creatures were viciously slaughtered, including those foul-mouthed centaurs. Hogwarts should be compensated according to the market value. As a director of Hogwarts, is there any problem with me asking you for compensation?" Hearing this, Cornelius Fudge's face became extremely ugly. At first, he thought that through this trial, he could force the other party to give up their interests, but now, not only did he not get a penny, but he also had to pay compensation to the other party. This back and forth was just like Kinshirhan eating peppercorns. It was so numb and numb. As a well-known miser, he could only express it shyly. "Mr. Hohenzollern, I don't quite agree with what you just said about Hogwarts Castle and the rest of the school's property. It has always been the responsibility of Hogwarts to protect all personal and organizational property in the British wizarding community on a legal basis. They are all protected by the British Ministry of Magic, but in fact, Hogwarts is an exception. So, having said that, Cornelius Fudge deliberately paused and secretly glanced at Karl's expression opposite him. Of course Karl knew that the other party was observing him, so he immediately used his god-level acting skills. He yelled, pretending to be very angry, "So, what? You don't plan to pay the money? Now you say that I'm just an exception. Then, when I use the emergency avoidance regulations to defend myself, what right did that old Crouch have to refute me? What's going on? You want to be a whore and also want to be a saint. You want to have both without paying a penny. Minister, stand Up now. Put your left foot on your right foot and see if you can get up to the sky. Don't keep talking nonsense to me. I want to see the money now, otherwise there will be no discussion. Cornelius. Fudge took a deep breath and looked at the young man in front of him. His face seemed to say, I'll kill you if you don't give me money. Knowing that he was doomed today, he immediately prepared to use the second method, crying poor, in the hope of minimizing the losses as much as possible. So he pretended to be embarrassed and said, Mr. Hohenzollern, I really can't make the decision on this. Once the Ministry of Magic's money enters the vault, without a very legitimate reason, you must not use even a single cent of it from the regular flow of funds. Now, apart from the funds to cover daily expenses, there is really not a single gold galleon left. If the British Ministry of Magic must be compensated, okay, then I'll pay you compensation out of my own pocket, but can we negotiate the amount? Karl looked at the sacrifice for the good expression on Cornelius Fudge's face and sneered in his heart. I didn't expect that the minister was also a natural performer, but the other party didn't understand what he said. This shows that he is extremely stupid. How could he only care about the compensation? The main body of Hogwarts Castle did not suffer any damage. The Forbidden Forest and those magical animals alone were worth less than 1 gold galleons. What he wanted was the Ministry of Magic's treasury, so he pretended to think about it and then asked in confusion, then if there is a legitimate reason, can we use the British Ministry of Magic's storage vault, such as establishing a pension system? Not only can we turn the money that is used to pay huge management fees every year into useful value, it can also enhance the happiness of officials in the Ministry of Magic, which is a good thing that can bring both fame and fortune. Pension system. What the hell is that? Cornelius Fudge suddenly became excited, and his previous timid and listless appearance suddenly became full of energy and vigor. Cole was trying hard to hold back his laughter. It seemed that this guy didn't have the courage to take responsibility, but he had the courage to make money by taking advantage of the situation. So he continued to speak in a persuasive manner. It's simple. The British Ministry of Magic took out a considerable amount of funds and deposited it in the first savings bank in the wizarding world, and authorized the professional investors in our bank to invest this money in the entire wizarding world and even the muggle world. The money earned is summarized every year, calculated in terms of gold, and the dividends are used to pay the retirement wages of those retired employees, or we can guarantee the welfare of the current employees, or even increase their salaries appropriately if the dividends are sufficient. As he spoke, Karl looked at Cornelius Fudge, pretending to be considerate of the other party, and said deliberately, at the same time, considering that it is impossible to make money every time when doing business, we need to keep the basic capital pool stable. The Ministry of Magic can deduct a small portion from the current salary and invest it into the pension system. It's called employee pension insurance, and everyone's income is different. Those with money can pay more, and those without money can pay less. We'll share the dividends together at the end of the year. After hearing the last part, Cornelius Fudge's eyes lit up completely. He immediately understood how to implement this matter without anyone teaching him. It would be of great help in improving his prestige in the British Ministry of Magic, which had almost reached the bottom point at the same time. He also understood the implication of Karl's words. He could completely unite those senior officials who had accepted bribes from him before. Invest the black money in this insurance slowly and continuously, and let it go around in circles. This black money becomes clean money, but the action must be trusted and requires the cooperation of the other party. So he cautiously tested it. Mr. Hohenzollern, you have a genius idea, as can be seen from the changes you have brought to the British wizarding world in the past year. I agree with your idea very much. Are there any low investment, high return projects? I also have some spare money that I would like you to manage. At this point, the other party was basically completely convinced. After all, as long as it wasn't out of his own pocket, the minister was still very generous. So Karl quickly said something to avoid the issue. Of course there are, but not necessarily in the magical world. I can exchange your gold galleons for gold later. I've entered the muggle world. There are many projects like the ones you want there, but they require a professional team. The fee ratio will be higher. How much do you need? Cornelius Fudge said impatiently. Carl slowly stretched out 3 fingers, and the other party saw it and nodded quickly. 30%. That's acceptable and no problem. Carol just smiled and spoke softly. I think you misunderstood. I meant that you can only get 30% of the profit in the end, and our professional team will charge 70%. Chapter 181, Professional Guidance and the Scapegoat. When Cornelius Fudge heard that he would be charged 70% of the fee, his smiling face instantly fell. He looked at Carol with an embarrassed expression and muttered softly, "Mr. Hohenzollern's fee standard can be improved. 70% is a bit too much. A lot." Carol's face was full of smiles, and his tone was calm and gentle. Since it is a professional team, it naturally requires professional fees. If I remember correctly, tonight FNTV will be conducting the first live television interview of the British wizarding world. It seems that the guest they invited is Mr. Barty Crouch, and they hope to let him speak regarding the recent anti-corruption storm in the British Ministry of Magic. I think this live broadcast will definitely yield great benefits. It will allow ordinary wizards to better understand Mr. Barty Crouch's painstaking efforts, and also facilitate further anti-corruption actions in the future. Provide the necessary public support. There should be 5 minutes before the TV station announces this election. I think you should support this. On the surface, these words had nothing to do with the topic of their conversation just now, but Cornelius Fudge still heard the other party's implied meaning point, so he quickly made an offer. How about 40%? I think that's generous enough. 4 minutes and 36 seconds left. 50%, at least half of the profit, so I can persuade other colleagues to join this plan. 3 minutes left. 60%. This is my limit. You have 1 minute to think about it. 4 minutes passed, and the guy was still stubborn. Carl said unceremoniously, while counting the time with his fingers. 30, 29, 28. Oh, just a reminder, my math is not very accurate, so there may be some deviations from the actual time, so please make a decision as soon as possible. 15, 14, 13. There is no need to keep counting. Herr Hohenzollern, Cornelius Fudge interrupted Karl's countdown and tried hard to smile. Mr. Hohenzollern, you are truly a natural businessman. It is always such a pleasure to work with you. I agree to your terms. 70%, no problem. I will also do the persuasion work. I just don't know when that TV station can arrange a special interview for me. Don't worry. Karl smiled with satisfaction and snapped his fingers at Cedric, who was watching the show. The other party immediately came over with a red briefcase, then opened it and took out a thick stack of speech manuscripts that had been prepared long ago. After placing it on the table in front of Cornelius Fudge, he took out an A4 paper that was not even half filled from the bottom of the box. He handed it to Karl, who stood up and handed it to Cornelius Fudge himself, explaining, "This pile contains your speech about the British Ministry of Magic, the greatest welfare project of the century. All the details, the brief analysis of professional knowledge, the reading of humanistic spirit, and the most necessary significance of doing so. Everything has been prepared for you, and this piece of paper handed to you is a summary or the actual content of the speech, succinct and to the point, can be read in 10 minutes. Looking at the dozens of pages of speech manuscripts and the summary of less than half a page in my hand, Cornelius Fudge had to admit that he was completely convinced this time, even in the political field, which was his most proud area. In front of this Mr. Hohenzollern, I was as ignorant as a primary school student. He briefly read the speech summary handed to him by the other party and asked a few new questions. I may need some time to adjust to how long the speech is and how many words it contains. The speech will be limited to 25 minutes. I don't know the word count, but you don't need time to adjust. FNTV has just announced you as the guest of its first public interview, but there are still about 2 hours before the live broadcast, which is enough time for 3 rehearsals. There will be an electronic screen prompter on site. If your eyesight is normal, there will be no problem. Karl replied kindly. Cornelius Fudge was still a little worried and continued to ask, "But this is my first time to give a public speech. How should I handle the speech, control my emotions and rhythm, I need some time to adapt. Looking at the cowardly look of the fat man in front of him, Cole was really speechless, but he would not allow any of his customers to feel dissatisfied. So he continued to speak patiently. When you arrive at the studio, a professional team will be there to help you. The reminder is free, including makeup artists, psychology guidance, and public speaking guidance. If you are really afraid of live broadcasting, we can also choose to record the rehearsal process and let you pick the best one to show to the public. Do you have any other questions? No. Cornelius Fudge looked embarrassed. He really didn't expect the other party to consider it so comprehensively. This level of professionalism made him feel satisfied with the transaction, but also made him feel a little angry for no apparent reason. I was already angry enough when I thought about the bunch of losers around me, but now I couldn't help but compare them with the young man in front of me. The more I think about it, the angrier I get. If it weren't for that group of rubbish, they would just surround me and flatter me every day. How did I end up in such a state? It all came down to my teammates being too incompetent and dragging down my performance. And just when Cornelius Fudge was still complaining that his secretary was useless, Carol, like a worm in the other person's stomach, guessed what was in the other person's mind. So he leaned back on the sofa and said nonchalantly, "Now that the matter between us has been resolved, let's discuss the case regarding the impeachment of the Ministry of Magic. There has to be an explanation. Those two auras couldn't have died in vain." "No, I haven't already." Cornelius Fudge looked at Karl in panic. Karl waved his hands repeatedly to signal the other party to stay calm and explained, "Of course, I have just stressed that the matter between us has been resolved, but you have said this in many meetings before. Rules err above all else. Now that this matter has become such a big deal, it would be unreasonable if there weren't one or two people who took the blame. But you don't have to worry too much. After all, you were not there at the time, and the name signed in black and white was not yours." "Ah, you right, Cornelius." Fudge immediately understood the implication of Karl's words and nodded quickly. That's natural. No one's life can be traded as a bargaining chip. Someone must be held accountable for all mistakes. I will definitely abide by the instructions given by the Wizengamot Council and handle this matter seriously without favoritism. Having said that, this secret deal was completely completed, and both parties got what they wanted. So Karl slowly stood up from the sofa and picked up the 2 glasses of sherry that had been poured on the table. He slowly walked to the other person's side and handed him one of the cups. "May we never have any more conflicts, dear Minister Cornelius." Fudge felt a little distressed at the moment, but was actually very relaxed. As a result, he turned his back and gently clinked glasses with the other party. "Of course, Mr. Hohenzollern." Chapter 180 to Cornelius Fudge, 039's investment plan. July 7th, London, England. After the secret deal was completed, the subsequent trial was just a formality. The British Wizarding Congress quickly declared that Cole was not guilty of using the unforgivable curse to kill Voldemort. At the same time, the Wizengamot Council heard Karl's 2 charges with great efficiency within 1 day. Umbridge, the Pink Toad, took all the blame. He should have been sent to Azkaban with free food and accommodation. But due to Karl's plea, he was assigned to work in the toilet of the British Ministry of Magic, where he continued to shine and work, preparing to serve the toilet sanitation of the British wizarding community until the last moment of his life. Today, in the VIP room of Barclays Bank, a young professional investment manager was looking at the investment plan in front of him. He asked politely, while his face twitched wildly, "Mr. Karl Hohenzollern, are you sure you want to manage the investment of this fund according to the investment plan you have formulated? I need to remind you that your plan has a very long time horizon, starting from this year's US presidential election. By 2022, when the Queen dies, the entire investment plan will span 30 years and will be entirely a gambling investment. Is that so? I need to confirm again." "Of course," Karl answered without hesitation. The professional agent who received the answer smiled bitterly, nodded politely, and then stood up and said, "Since you insist on making this choice, then as your investment broker, I can only act according to your wishes. I'm going to get the contract." I'll be away for now. Bye. Having said that, the professional agent turned and left, but before leaving, he did not forget to take a look at the person sitting on the luxurious leather sofa. Karl, wearing exaggerated frog sunglasses, a cheap t-shirt, and sea blue beach pants, is drinking Coca-Cola with a pink straw. It was as if 1,000 horses were galloping through my heart when I thought of Barclays Bank as the earliest bank in the world. The clients of the service have always been the top wealthy families in Europe or members of royal families of various countries, and I have always served these distinguished gentlemen. Providing the best financial services. Have you ever thought that the biggest order you ever received would come from such an extravagantly dressed American? Moreover, the other party's investment plan was simply ridiculous, but for the sake of the 5% service fee, he had no choice but to lower himself and serve such a vulgar guy. After he left, Cedric, who was dressed the same as Karl, quickly stood up and looked at Karl and asked with some concern, "Is it really okay for you to do this, Mr. Cornelius Fudge?" And his men might not just let it go. Faced with the doubts, Karl spoke bluntly while using the straw in his mouth to spit bubbles in the remaining Coke. "What are you talking about? I promised to help them clean up the dirty money, but I didn't promise how long it would take. The contract they signed with me is a stable pension insurance, so I will give them a stable pension insurance, starting from this year until 2022, a 30-year stable investment plan. Isn't that conscientious enough? You actually doubt my character. I think you're itchy again. Stable investment?" Cedric almost laughed out of anger when he heard this. He looked at Karl in disbelief as he was about to go on vacation. He complained silently in his heart, "It is indeed stable enough, with a 30-year betting plan, ranging from the score predictions of various sports competitions to the time of the British parliamentary early general election, the winner of the US election across the ocean, and even the time of the death of the Queen of England, were all used by this guy's investment plans. From the nearly £7,000 million of dirty money Cornelius Fudge handed over to him every year, a small portion was taken out for gambling. The proceeds from gambling are regarded as investment income, and this guy's really a shady guy. The professional brokers of other banks usually only charge 2.5% for their services. As a result, because the investment plan was too absurd, and they were afraid it would only damage their brand, this guy was forced to pay them a 5% service fee. I took the remaining 65% for myself and complained to myself while drinking Coke with an unhappy look on my face. I lost a lot of money again today, but after complaining about Karl, Cedric was even more shocked by which professional investor actually walked in with a contract. After pointing out a few details in the contract, he handed the pen to Karl and said, "If there are no problems, Mr. Hohenzollern, please sign here." Karl took the pen, skipped all the details prompted by the other party, turned directly to the last page of the contract, and signed his name in a cool manner. Then he put the limited edition Mont Blanc pen into his pocket without leaving a trace, and after the other party found it, deliberately changing the subject. "Oh, by the way, I need to emphasize that this investment plan must be carried out according to the schedule I mentioned. The first investment must start after 15 days. Hearing this, the professional investor was obviously stunned for a moment, but soon nodded slightly, staring at the pocket where Cole was wearing his pen. He said this in a somewhat sarcastic tone. "That's natural. Mr. Barclays Bank always acts in accordance with the wishes of our customers. We only provide the best service they want, but I would like to remind you in the end that investment has risks. Please understand if the returns do not meet your expectations." Of course. Karl looked into the other person's eyes with a smile on his face. He saw the disdain in the other person's eyes, but he didn't care much, and immediately left the bank with Cedric. As soon as they stood on the street, Cedric couldn't help but ask, "It's really crazy. I never imagined that such a ridiculous investment plan could actually be implemented in this country." Karl responded with disdain, "I understand very well that people can't imagine things, they can't comprehend things, but gambling in the UK, selling blood in the US, and prostitution in Eastern Europe are all normal for people living in these lands. Are you interested in investing in it? I guarantee you will make a lot of money." "Stop. Cedric asked with a serious expression and dark eyes looking at Karl. I will not participate in this kind of behavior, but I just heard that you need to explain why you go to Eastern Europe for prostitution. Why? Do you know these things? You must tell me the truth, otherwise I will tell Professor McGonagall. Oh my, the threat hadn't been made for long when Cedric was hit hard on the head by Karl again. Karl said unhappily. Don't understand too much, kid. It won't do you any good. You finally regained your freedom. It will take about 15 days for the money from the Ministry of Magic to arrive. Let's go on vacation first. Come back and do the real work. Cedric put his hands on his head with grievance and said angrily, then I have to ask my father first. I'm going to be away from home for such a long time. I need his permission to leave the UK. After saying that, he turned around and left angrily, but before he had taken 2 steps, Carol grabbed his neck and pulled him back. He pulled Cedric, then walked towards the side of the road and snapped his fingers twice. A classic Rolls-Royce Phantom quickly drove out of the intersection and stopped in front of the 2 people. Cedric was roughly stuffed into the back seat by Karl. When he came to his senses, he saw Karl staring at him and talking. Don't worry, I have already considered this. If I'm not mistaken, your father should be traveling in Egypt now. Principal Dumbledore has already written a letter to him. You are not allowed to go anywhere in the next 2 months. Just stay by my side. I paid for it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183, Flying to America. Under the moonlight, the white Boeing 707-8 VIP made a deafening roar and flew through the clouds into the distance. This ultra-long-range giant passenger aircraft is the prototype aircraft of the US President's Air Force One. The original purpose of the design was to provide the most perfect luxury service for the super rich who are among the billionaires or politicians from various countries. The entire plane can be called a sky mansion and has all the facilities needed for a luxurious vacation, including a gold decorated bedroom and an ultra luxurious bathroom. Flying over the raging Atlantic Ocean, it was as quiet as a giant blue whale wandering in the deep sea. After Cedric covered Cole with a quilt, he sat on the sofa in the living room of the plane, feeling a little bored. Through the window next to me, I looked at the dark sea at night. He really felt a little confused. In the past 15 years of his life, he had never felt as confused as he did at that moment. In his past life, he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he wanted to study hard and become his father's pride. Make good friends with everyone you meet and have a wonderful and fulfilling learning experience. But a year ago, when Karl broke into his life like a wild boar into a porcelain shop, his life seemed to have completely changed. At that moment, and a whole new world appeared before him. This world is not as bad as other wizards say. Muggles are not stupid at all, and they don't have to do everything by themselves. On the contrary, they were very smart, and their brilliant philosophical thoughts and magnificent artistic achievements made him extremely intoxicated. Of course, there is also the technology that even wizards find magical, but behind the beauty, there is cruelty in this world that he cannot understand. Of course, he had heard from his parents since he was a child that some dark wizards would do extremely cruel and terrible things to muggles, but compared to everything he saw in that land, the cruelty of the dark wizards seemed so merciful. At least they won't be like those perpetrators who do such cruel things to their own kind and still feel complacent and smug. And declared himself the victim and the righteous party in the newspaper. In Karl's words, compared with pure bad guys, these people are even more disgusting and despicable. Because pure bad guys dare to admit what they have done. He even retained the last bit of fear in humanity for what he had done, and calmly accepted the tragic fate he was about to suffer. And these people are nothing but a bunch of hypocritical garbage. Thinking back on it all, Cedric felt like his head was going to explode. His brain was overloaded. He felt a little tired, and after yawning, Cedric walked to the sofa opposite Karl. She slowly lay down and looked at Carol sleeping. His long eyelashes were trembling slightly, and his delicate face made people fall in love with him at first sight point. But compared to usual, Cedric found that there was a real calmness on Carol's face today point at school. He always felt that the expression on Carl's face was unreal point. He also remembered that there were a few nights when he drank too much water and was woken up by the urge to go to the toilet point. But suddenly I found Carol in the middle of the night, sitting at his desk in pajamas, holding a glass of wine, looking out the window, his eyes full of anger. "What are you angry about?" Looking at Carl's face, Cedric muttered, half asleep. "Strawberry, passion fruit, can you add an extra spoonful of honey? Why are you so resistant to desserts? What are you dreaming about?" Cedric raised his hands high and grabbed in the air when suddenly he caught something soft and squeezed it lightly. It felt a bit like dough, but tougher than dough, so he pulled it to both sides with both hands, trying to see the limit of the dough's toughness. Before he could get the result, he was hit hard on the forehead. "Oops," Cedric cried out in pain and quickly sat up on the sofa. But as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Carol staring at him. The two were so close that the tips of their noses were only 1 centimeter apart. "What are you dreaming about?" Karl asked again. Cedric looked at the slightly red skin on both sides of Carol's face, lowered his head in embarrassment, but found that on his body. Covering Cole with the blanket he had covered him with before, he felt even more embarrassed and quickly changed the subject. Nothing, just thinking of some delicious food." "Oh, and where are we? Where are we going on this trip to America?" Listening to the incomprehensible answer from this stupid guy, Cole was too lazy to talk nonsense with him and pointed to the window next to him. Cedric quickly looked down through the window, and a huge city with bright lights suddenly appeared under the wing. The street lights on the highway weave a giant shining web, and the searchlights and neon lights on the tall buildings seemed to secretly drip a few drops of color on this spider web. It turned out that the two of them had slept for almost 7 hours and flew across the Atlantic Ocean from London, England to New York, the crossroads of the world. "How much do you know about this city?" Karl also turned his head to look out the window and suddenly asked. "It is the largest city in the eastern United States, and Wall Street, the center of world finance, is also located in this city. There's also the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, Central Park, Times Square, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and so much more. I read an introduction to this city in a British travel magazine. It is indeed very attractive," Cedric said excitedly, with a slightly proud expression on his face. It was like a puppy who had just picked up a ball thrown by his owner and was waiting to be praised. But Cole was obviously not a good master, and his slight nod was an acknowledgement of Cedric's work. Then he said it with disdain in a sarcastic tone. "What you said is correct. This city is like a young and energetic beauty who is always tireless, dancing in front of the world under the neon lights. No matter how bright and colorful the neon lights are, no matter how delicate the makeup on my face is, it can't hide my out of shape figure and my declining appearance. This city is the facade of the empire, but the empire behind it is already on the countdown of its death." Cedric looked at Karl in disbelief and couldn't help but retort, "That's not right. According to the information I've seen, the United States is now the only superpower in the world. Their only opponent fell just last year. How is it possible that the entire country is on the countdown of death? Even if you are sick, someone has to issue a critical illness notice. When will it be issued?" Hearing this, Karl looked at Cedric in surprise. He first smiled with satisfaction, then searched his body. "But I found that I didn't bring any cigarettes with me on the plane." So he took out a bottle from the champagne bucket next to him, poured 2 glasses of wine, and handed one to Cedric. Then he clinked glasses with the other person, drank it all, and spoke slowly. "It seems that you are really not lazy, and are beginning to see some problems floating beneath the surface. I can answer your question. The critical illness notice was issued on December 1991, 12. Hearing this time, Cedric's eyes widened, but he didn't expect that Carol's next sentence would surprise him even more. He just said calmly, "The leaders who control this giant empire would never have thought that their most powerful opponent would be the one before they slid into the abyss. The last brake pad under your feet Chapter 184 Arrested. As I got off the plane, the sun shines like tiny pieces of gold foil, gently sprinkling on the Manhattan skyline, and the steel forest wakes up in the morning light. Each skyscraper is like a giant tree, stretching its muscles in the Sunday eye. And Cole were standing at one end of the Brooklyn Bridge, holding a tourist map of New York City. As we planned our next travel route, the air around us was filled with a mixture of seafood and gasoline. It's a special flavor of New York, with a bit of American ruggedness and a hint of glamour. Cedric, who was staying in a small dark room with Karl, recalled the fantasies he had in his mind when he first came to New York Point, but now everything has become a bubble. When he found that the plane was landing, there was no other plane landing at the same time around the airport. Cedric knew that something was wrong. Sure enough, when they got off the plane, they were not greeted by an enthusiastic tour guide or a taxi driver anxious to pick up customers. Instead, it was a group of aurors from the Magical Congress of the United States wearing long trench coats. The first words they said when they saw Cole were so familiar. "Mr. Hohenzollern, you are under arrest." In this way, the two people were taken to a building in downtown New York City, and those who were required to memorize the course materials were asked to enter this small dark room. He stayed here for a full hour, and two aurors with stern faces began to interrogate Karl. The content was varied, but Karl's answers were so consistent. "I don't know. I'm not sure. If you ask me, who should I ask?" After a whole hour of arguing, the two aurors looked at Karl, who had an indifferent expression, and Cedric, who was anxious beside him. He said quite angrily, "Mr. Hohenzollern, why did you come back to America again? Haven't you caused us enough trouble? The 1,000-year-old balance between the wizarding world and the muggle world is gradually being broken because of you. You are not welcome here." Karl raised his eyelids slightly and looked at the two aurors with contempt. "Gentlemen, first of all, according to the nationality classification of the wizarding world, I should be a British wizard. The Magical Congress of the United States has no jurisdiction over me. Secondly, according to the laws of the Muggle world, I'm an American citizen. You have no right to govern what I do. If the two elites think that what I have done before on this land, if your interests are damaged, or if it involves a crime, you can file a lawsuit in a Muggle court. This is America. Isn't everything subject to the law?" Having said that, Carol simply ignored the two guys, pulled up Cedric, who was still in a daze, stood up and prepared to leave. Instead, the two aurors blocked the doorway, held out their hands, and spoke sternly. "Hand over your wands. We have no right to regulate what you do in the Muggle world, but you are not allowed to do anything reckless. As long as you stay in this land, you are not allowed to use magic privately." 10, 9, 8. Karl counted down softly. Seeing that the other party did not take them seriously, the two aurors were about to warn Karl again, but the other party had already received the last number. Just as he finished counting, the door of the small dark room was hurriedly opened by someone from the outside. A person dressed as a secretary came in hurriedly, and when the other party saw Karl, he hurriedly shook the other party's hand and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Hohenzollern. We made a mistake. You are free to leave. We apologize for our mistake. I'm terribly sorry." "No need." Karl shook off the other person's right hand that was holding his, then pulled up Cedric's right hand and pushed away the two aurors. He walked straight towards the door, but when he reached the door, he suddenly turned around, looked at the two guys and smiled. "If the balance you mentioned is so important, but can be broken by me alone, then it means that this balance is not solid in the first place. Before you leave, I want to remind you that, even though you are Americans and wizards, you still need to study hard. This country has only been established for 216 years. There is no so-called millennial balance. Pay attention to cultural cultivation. I don't want to see that the law enforcers of the magical world and the law enforcers of the muggle world are illiterate in some sense. As for me, you may rest assured that I'm a pure egoist and businessman, and that I'm here like all the others who come here throughout the world. I'm just here for business." After saying that, Karl took Cedric away directly, leaving the 3 staff members of the Magical Congress of the United States standing there staring at each other. After several minutes of silence, Honora roared with a red face, "What does he mean? Well, let him go. He is an extremely dangerous man. Haven't you heard about what happened in England? He used the unforgivable curse to kill more than 10 people. How could such a dangerous person escape supervision?" Faced with the roar, the secretary glared at the other party unhappily and then said with disdain, "If you have a temper, go talk to the chairman. Anyway, he just received a call from Mr. Hohenzollern. It's not as simple as we thought. He came to the United States at the invitation of someone." "Who invited you?" another aura asked. "It's a call from the Arkansas governor's office," the secretary said calmly. "He's from the Muggle world. How can he call the Magic Congress?" The 2 auras were shocked and asked questions in unison. Hearing this, the secretary's disdain grew even stronger. He sighed and shook his head. "You really don't care about those Muggles at all, Mr. Governor. This is not just because of the federal officials. He has another identity this year, the Democratic presidential candidate. You are just like those old stubborn people. You still think that wizards are superior to Muggles because they have magic. Go out and see more. Or it's just like what that gentleman said, read a little more, otherwise you will appear ignorant." These words made the already red faces of the 2 auras even redder, and one of them pointed at the secretary in exasperation. "Clapham Carter, you are a pro-Muggle guy. The Magical Congress of the United States has been messed up by guys like you. I don't believe that Mr. Hohenzollern is really here to do business. What kind of business is so attractive?" Carter, who was scolded by the other party, did not refute and turned around to leave, but just talked to himself as he walked. "What a bunch of stupid people. With a little deduction, you can figure out what the business Mr. Hohenzollern is talking about is. It's a big business that only happens every 4 years, the US presidential election." Chapter 185. 7-day trip to New York. "This dress seems to be too small. It makes my stomach feel uncomfortable." Cedric looked at his stomach, which was tightened by his shirt, and complained quietly. Carol raised his head slightly, glanced at the other person's belly, and said with a cold snort, "It's not that the clothes are too small, it's just that you've gained weight again. Dear senior, I'm actually a little curious. It stands to reason that, even if a normal man eats and drinks a lot for a week, the hormones in his body will cause his body to not grow so much fat. But you're more like a woman. If you don't keep an eye on it, the fat on your belly will grow rapidly." As he spoke, he deliberately stretched out his right hand and pinched Cedric's newly grown swim ring. It felt really good. After the other party slapped his hands away, he smiled and took out the car refrigerator next to him. "Take out a bottle of champagne, pour yourself a glass, and taste it." While lying in the back seat of this Escalade luxury SUV. Looking at the young man in front of me worrying about the fat on his belly. Cedric was really helpless. He was eating the same thing, so why was his stomach so disappointing? There was no change in this guy's body, but he was still angry about the travel arrangements for this week. Cedric had to admit that Carol was really considerate, even though this guy was always foul-mouthed and unreasonable. However, the 2 of them visited all the New York attractions that I mentioned on the plane without missing a single one. On the first day after leaving Macusa, the 2 took a ferry and traveled through the waves of the Hudson River until the statue symbolizing freedom and hope stood tall before my eyes. The moment I saw the bronze statue. Cedric excitedly showed off his historical knowledge to Karl. "Did you know that this statue was a gift from France to the United States in 1876 on the 100th anniversary of its independence? The plaque held in the left hand of the goddess statue is the United States Declaration of Independence, her design concept. It symbolizes freedom and freedom from the constraints of tyranny. Originally, Cedric said these things out of emotion at the beginning, and at the same time, wanted to get some praise from Karl. But this guy didn't buy it at all, and just spoke sarcastically. Of course. After all, that's what the founding fathers of the United States can say about themselves, even though they were big planters, raised black slaves, and massacred Indians. But I'm still a fighter for freedom and democracy, spreading the ideas of freedom and fraternity of the French Enlightenment to the world. All men are created equal, but it is up to them to decide who is or is not. When Karl finished saying this, Cedric still remembered that the Americans around him were stunned at first, and then became extremely angry, pointing at the two people, and cursing. If the two of them had not been on a chartered yacht, they might have died on the first day of their trip. They will be pushed into the river, thus starting a triathlon swimming competition in the Hudson River. After visiting the Statue of Liberty, the two came to the Empire State Building, once the top of the world, and took the elevator go directly to the observation deck like a time traveler, and stand there looking down, to truly feel the prosperity of the city of New York. The skyscrapers are like a steel forest, but in the center of this man-made forest, Central Park is an oasis in the forest. After lunch at the Empire State Building restaurant, the two strolled through Central Park, the afternoon sun filtering through the leaves scattered on the winding paths. People are surrounded by jogging athletes, leisurely tourists, and middle-class families out for picnics. There were also the children feeding the ducks by the lake, and of course himself. I still remember that it was Karl who saw me staring at the group of children feeding the ducks and took out a bag of feed from his pocket like a magician. Hand it in front of yourself. Take it. I have long guessed that you would have great interest in this childish game, but I will warn you, these artificially made refined feeds are not good for those animals. Don't let them eat them and become as fat as you. Thinking of this, and now looking at his protruding belly, Cedric felt particularly angry. It's all because of this guy. At the beginning, the two of them were eating normally. It was this guy who said that, don't think about eating French food when you come to the United States. Fried chicken with French fries and a big bottle of Coke is the best choice. As he said that, he rushed into those roadside fried chicken shops and bought fried chicken with various seasonings and cheese, onion rings, Texas grilled steak, paired with passion fruit flavored donuts and a liter or so bottle of Coke. Such a high calorie chain bomb. No one will get fat if they eat it, except for one person. Cedric stared at Karl's flat belly with his eyes slanted. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Finally, he turned his head away and didn't want to look at him. At the same time, in order to avoid the upcoming important banquet, the two-person team disbanded before it even started. Cedric began to try hard to recall the relatively successful trip they had had. On the third and fourth days, the two went to Times Square together, which is the heart of New York, with neon lights shining and billboards constantly changing colors. The bustling crowds of people from all over the world in the street. Performances with exaggerated and unique styles always attract the attention of passers-by. It was in that place that Cedric felt for the first time the gap between the United Kingdom and the United States, to countries that both spoke English. If you perform with a guitar on a British street or near a train station, you won't attract too many people. The weather in London is always grey, and so are the pedestrians there. They always walk hurriedly with their collars turned up in long windbreakers. People are not very willing to show their enthusiasm to others, but it is completely different in the United States. Here, even if you are tone deaf, the songs they play and sing are simply unbearable to your ears. There will also be a large group of people surrounding you, cheering and booing, and of course some of them may just want to steal the money given to you in your hat. After feeling the heart of the city, the two people's travel route gradually became artistic. In the last 3 days, the two went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Broadway Opera House respectively. There is nothing much to say about the Opera House on Broadway. We went to see an opera performance of Les Miserables together. It was quite exciting, but didn't have any special features. While visiting the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Cedric discovered that Karl always liked to stand in front of some exhibitions of Oriental artifacts. He would stroke the glass with his hands, stand there for a long time, and always liked to say some inexplicable words. When it's time to return, it's time to return. When I asked him about it, he just smiled and shook his head. A slow breaking sound brought Cedric back to his memory. The black Cadillac Escalade. Walk through the neon lit streets and stop at the famous Waldorf Astoria Hotel. The car door was opened from the outside by a uniformed waiter. Karl drank the last bit of champagne, stood up but did not get out of the car. Instead, he took out a white shirt from the storage box nearby and threw it in Cedric's face. Then he got out of the car, closed the door himself, and spoke softly through the door. Change your clothes before you come down. I don't want to go to the party with a guy who is out of shape. Chapter 186. Curious Cedric. Led by the waiter, Cedric and Karl walked into the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Due to the special nature of today's banquet, the entire corridor is decorated with American flags, and blue and white become the main colors this time. Are these all the American presidents who held campaign parties here? Cedric couldn't help asking as he looked at the oil paintings of people hanging in the corridor. Karl slowly stopped and turned to look at the paintings. These oil paintings are basically of American presidents, including some famous ones, such as President Theodore Roosevelt, who was known as the Trust Buster Woodrow Wilson at the Paris Peace Conference, and the most famous American president. As a disabled person, he led a paralyzed country out of the shadow of the economic crisis and won the Second World War. President Franklin Roosevelt completed the transfer of hegemony with Britain and brought more than 6,000 degrees of warmth to the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. His portrait was placed in the most prominent place, and the frame was twice as large as that of others. However, compared to the huge poster next to him, this great sage does not seem so prominent. At the main entrance of the reception room, a huge campaign poster was hung directly above the reception room. The poster is designed in the unique American exaggerated style, with blue and white tones and other national flag colors, plus a huge character portrait and a campaign slogan in gold-plated font. It's the economy, stupid. After walking through the corridor to the reception room, Cedric and Karl were quickly led to their seats by the waiter. The dining table was covered with a gorgeous blue lace tablecloth, while the tableau and decorative flowers were all white in color. Various drinks had already been placed on the table, including luxurious French champagne, strong bourbon whiskey, and some cocktails that were easy for women to drink. A band was playing relaxing and slow music. People were wearing gorgeous clothes, and the sounds of conversation, laughter and clinking of wine glasses were intertwined. Almost no one was idle, except Cedric and Karl, who were sitting alone at a dining table. Karl drank calmly, while Cedric was like a mole that suddenly dug through the ground. He turned his head and looked around, appearing a little nervous. Why are you so nervous? Karl put down his glass and looked at the other person, saying jokingly, no one cares about your nice little belly, it's well covered by your clothes. What are you talking about? Cedric shouted loudly, a little exasperated, and then realized that his voice was too loud. He quickly leaned down and pressed close to Karl, pointing around and speaking in a low voice. I'm just a little uncomfortable with this kind of situation. Most of the people around me are about the same age as our parents. They're all walking around and socializing, and we're just sitting here. Isn't that a bit out of place? Karl looked at the guy in front of him with a smile. He did not answer the other's question, but just stretched out his right hand and raised it high. Then he flicked his head on the other person's fair forehead. With a muffled sound, Cedric bent down with his hands on his forehead. When he looked up again, tears appeared in his eyes. What are you doing? It hurts, don't you know? Karl ignored the other person's anger and just opened the bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey beside him. Ask the waiter for 2 wine glasses filled with ice and sparkling water, and divide the wine in the bottle into 2 portions. He took one of them and placed it on Cedric's forehead, then smiled through the transparent amber liquid. Chill it. If you get a bump on your head, it won't look good when you dance. What we just did was quite unconventional. Look around you. Does anyone care about what we two do? Hearing this, Cedric took the wine glass, cooled his forehead with it, and looked around slyly. The result was just as Karl said. The people around them who were busy socializing seemed to completely ignore the two of them. It was as if the two of them were just air and didn't exist at all. Why? Cedric asked in confusion. Karl smiled faintly, put the business card on the dining table for the two of them in front of Cedric, and motioned for him to take a look. Cedric picked up the name tag and read the words on it in confusion. Milligrams. Biopharmaceuticals Limited. What does this mean? When did we become the people of this company? Of course you haven't heard of it. Karl continued with a smile. Because this company was established less than a month ago, and This is a company that makes biopharmaceuticals using magic potions. These muggles have certainly never heard of it. To these people, we are nothing more than political speculators in a startup company, a bunch of old gentlemen living in high society. Of course, there is no need to communicate too much with us. Once our new drug is on the market, the invisibility curse on us will naturally be lifted. So, that's how it is. Cedric nodded thoughtfully, and then seemed to have thought of something pointy. Quickly pulled Carol to his side, and asked in a low voice with a nervous look on his face, "What did you just say? Potions? You used potion materials to make so-called medicine. This is a serious violation of wizard law. It's been less than a month since you were acquitted. What are you going to do? Don't forget when we just got off the plane, those guys from the Magical Congress of the United States of America are not very friendly to us." Karl, who was suddenly pulled by Cedric and had the wine spilled all over him, put the glass on the table gracefully. He picked up the napkin beside him and wiped his shirt, then turned his head and held Cedric's face with both hands while pulling it to the sides with all his strength. He roared as quietly as possible, "Can you shut up? Are you a child? Why do you have so many questions? I brought you to the party. I just want you to get in touch with this kind of environment in advance. I don't want you to be the one asking questions. I have my own plans." "How do you think I made my first fortune in New York? How did you make money?" Cedric's face was hurt by Karl's pulling, but this guy seemed like a curious golden retriever. Even if it is beaten with slippers by its owner, it will still do annoying things about the things it is curious about. Carol was really helpless. He could only continue to pull Cedric's face with his hands while giving tough orders. "Don't ask any more questions. Your task today is to dance with me at the end of the party. If you dare to ask questions again, believe it or not, I will make you eat hay every day for a whole semester after I return to school." Chapter 187 The Banquet and CEDRIC and -039 S Intuition. The fight between the two teenagers did not last long, as the guests who had been seated around them suddenly stood up and applauded at the same time. At the same time, the band next to the dance floor played a stirring entrance music. A handsome and well-dressed middle-aged man, the Democratic presidential candidate Clinton. Accompanied by a group of black-clad bodyguards, he came to the podium in front of the dance floor. He waved cordially to the guests present, and then, unlike a traditional politician, he did not start by speaking about some obscure party manifesto. He just joked with everyone with a smile on his face. "Thank you all for coming to this banquet. Generally speaking, I need to say a few words before the banquet officially begins, but I don't think it's necessary. Just like our campaign slogan, we don't have to be smart. You just have to choose to do the right thing, and I think the right thing to do right now is to give everyone here a good meal. After eating, everyone will have the energy to sign a check for me." After the joke, he nodded cordially to everyone present, then walked off the stage and went to a table that had already been occupied. After the protagonist took his seat, the music played by the band changed from the previous passionate music to soft and long music. In Carol's eyes, eating is the most important part of the whole banquet, which is when the meal officially begins. Waiters in tuxedos came in one after another, carrying dishes. A moment later, the entire table was filled with various delicacies carefully prepared by the chefs, from fresh Boston lobster sashimi. From filet mignon grilled in butter and rosemary to the soul of French cuisine, rich soups of various flavors. Cedric was eating with his mouth full of oil. There were only him and Cole at his table, but the dishes were ordered for 8 people per table. So the guy took the steak knife in one hand, picked up the whole fillet steak, and tore the beef in a very rough manner with the other hand. He skillfully used chopsticks to stack slices of salmon and Boston lobster sashimi together. Finally, dip the chopped garlic slices in the prepared spicy soy sauce, gently stroke the sashimi twice, and wait for the seasoning juice to seep deep into the crystal clear meat slices. Then pick it up with chopsticks, swallow it in one gulp, and feel the extreme freshness teasing your taste buds. Looking at the teoti in front of him, Karl could only awkwardly hold the crystal wine glass and shake it gently in front of his eyes. Even though he was sitting with his back to everyone, he could still feel countless eyes focused on his back. This made him turn his head awkwardly, and smile awkwardly at the crowd looking at him. Most of them responded with friendly smiles, and some of them even had genuinely happy looks in their eyes. He even found that several elderly people who had poor appetite due to their old age seemed to become more interested in the food in front of them. This is probably the reason why some old people in the countryside like to watch the pigs they raise eat. It really looks delicious. There were also a few people whose eyes revealed a kind of blame, as if they were questioning Karl why he was so harsh on his companions. Look at him. He looks like he hasn't eaten for 800 days. Karl could only choose to accept this kind of accusatory look silently. After all, he couldn't explain it to everyone present. My senior didn't go hungry because he was abused by me for a long time. He just had a lot of food. At the same time, Karl also thought that this embarrassing situation would not last too long. After all, he was well aware of Cedric's eating speed. Sure enough, it only took 2 glasses of red wine for Cedric to eat the last piece of sashimi. The dining phase of the entire banquet was officially declared over. Cedric touched his round belly with a satisfied smile on his face. He didn't notice the unique looks from the people around him at all. But with the rise of Mr. Clinton, people's attention shifted. Clinton stood on an ornately decorated podium, his figure towering above the white spotlight. Unlike those politicians in the Cold War era who often had serious expressions on their faces, this star politician has been labeled as young, smiling, and close to ordinary people since his debut. From the moment he stepped onto the stage, the smile on his face never faded, and the rest of his speech was completely consistent with his appearance. Unlike other politicians, whose opening remarks are as shocking as thunder, Clinton's opening was more like a talk show performance. A few jokes with American humor made the whole audience laugh. His voice was deep and magnetic. The speech was obviously carefully polished, and every word was carefully considered. What did you think of this speech, Karl suddenly asked halfway through his speech. Cedric was obviously not prepared, but there was one thing he was sure of, that was that Karl must not have listened to the speech carefully. Because no one will rest their head on their companion's shoulder while listening to a speech. Cedric then coughed lightly and said in a serious tone, "Very good." The theme of the speech was clear and the rhythm was well controlled. You can see that everyone present was laughing happily. From a certain perspective, this can even be considered a good motivational essay, which can motivate the audience to pursue higher goals. But at the end, Cedric suddenly changed the subject and said in confusion, "But I always feel that his words are full of performance emotions, which is more like a pre-rehearsed performance rather than what he really wanted to say. My personal intuition told me that this was more like a lie." You still have this intuition? Karl, who was resting on Cedric's shoulder, looked up at the other's eyes and smiled. "Then, you are not a natural lie detector. Can you detect whether I have lied to you?" Hearing this, Cedric was obviously stunned for a moment. He lowered his head and remained silent for a long time. Finally, he raised his head and touched his face and said awkwardly, "I have always had this intuition, and it is very effective. I can often tell by the tone of my classmates' conversations in the academy. You can't tell if they stole my snacks or even lied to me, but this intuition doesn't work for you, or rather, the intuition in my mind has been deceiving myself. It is trying to convince me that you would not lie to me." This time it was Karl's turn to be stunned. He raised his head slightly and moved slightly away from Cedric's shoulder. He stared into the other person's eyes for a long time, then silently leaned his head back and continued to listen to the speech in silence. It was not until the end of the speech that he suddenly asked again, "Now, feel whether what he is going to say next is true or not." Chapter 188 Gambling and Dancing. "Why do you have such a question?" Cedric looked at Cole with some confusion. Karl smiled pretentiously and spoke slowly. "It seems that I overestimated you before. You do have some qualities that I cannot help but admire, such as your amazing intuition, but your ability to understand things is still a little poor. You can't connect all the things together. I just can't understand what the other party is going to do next." "What do you mean?" Cedric continued to ask. Karl stretched out his finger and hooked it towards himself, motioning the other party to come closer, and then spoke in a low voice, First, let me give you some tips that you should consider about what's special about this year's presidential campaign. The clue is the major event that happened in the world last year, and the target of the guess is the topic of the other person's next speech. Cedric, who got the hint, thought silently for a while, then shook his head very honestly. There are some clues, but they are so complicated that I can't draw any valid conclusions. Looking at Cedric's honest and confused face, Karl suddenly felt playful and seductive. Well, there are still 60 seconds left. Why don't we make a bet between the two of us? And to ensure fairness, I will give my own judgment 10 seconds before he starts each new topic. If I guess all of them correctly, I win the bet, and then we'll have the dancing session at the end of the banquet. As my dancing partner, how about you act as the female partner? When Cedric heard this, his fair face turned red from his neck to the top of his head, like a cooked lobster, while constantly analyzing the conditions proposed by Karl in his mind. Karl, on the side, continued to use his traditional skills to persuade quietly. According to the schedule, he still has about 15 minutes to speak, which means he should be able to cover 4 topics on average. I have to guess all 4 topics correctly for me to win. If you get one of them wrong, you win. There are still 20 seconds left. You can take your time to think. I'll count down for you. 10.9.8.7. Quote. When the countdown reached the last 7 seconds, Cedric nodded firmly. Okay, I'll bet with you, but it has to be done according to the conditions you just set, and only if I win. You have to pay me 27,650 gold galleons. Why do you need so much money? Cole was stunned for a moment. You have both small and large amounts. Are you going to buy something special? Cedric turned his head away with all his strength, not looking into Karl's eyes, and spoke softly with his lips pouted. Don't worry about it. Just tell me whether you agree or not. Karl, shut up, leaned on Cedric's shoulder and extended a little finger of his right hand. Cedric also extended a little finger of his left hand, and the two of them gently hooked their fingers together to indicate that the bet was established. The moment the two men had just shaken hands, Karl spoke first. The next topic is women's reproductive rights and abortion. As soon as he finished speaking, a large group of young women holding up banners appeared behind Mr. Clinton on the stage. They held up pieces of paper of different colors with words written on them such as slogans such as I'm the master of my own body, abortion is not murder, as a woman I'm the master of my own body. Mr. Clinton also spoke passionately. When I become president, I will completely change the current oppression of women in American society and promote legislation on abortion rights. Cedric didn't listen to what was said next. He just turned his head blankly and looked at Karl, who was resting with his eyes closed. His eyes were full of surprise, and when he heard the voice again, it was Karl speaking softly. The next topic is about religion. As soon as he finished speaking, Mr. Clinton on the stage spoke again with passion. God blesses America, and the people living in this land have absolute religious freedom. God loves the world, and any discrimination in the name of God is unacceptable. Next topic, about guns. How long are we going to have to endure this? Mr. Clinton clenched his right fist and slammed it on the podium. With a grief-stricken expression on his face, he called out loudly, right here in our great state of New York, there are dozens of shootings every week. The prevalence of gun violence has seriously damaged the reputation of the United States and caused countless irreparable tragedies. Our children are the only ones who need to worry about whether they will be shot to death by their classmates while they are in school. This situation must not continue. Never. The last topic is about gender and homosexuality. America's freedom and tolerance are the foundation of our country. This topic is slightly milder than the previous 3. There were no exaggerated body movements or children covered in blood during Mr. Clinton's speech. Compared to those who stood behind him and cheered for him, his speech was more like an exposition of the American spirit. At the end of his speech, Mr. Clinton pointed to the sky and smiled. I hope that in the years to come, each of us will have the courage to express love, and that every bit of love will not be discriminated against by anyone. God bless America and God bless you. After he finished speaking, The whole audience burst into thunderous applause, and Cole raised his head from Cedric's shoulder. He smiled at Cedric, whose face was filled with surprise, and clapped vigorously. After the applause ended, everyone stood up, and waiters in tuxedos came in one after another and quickly moved the table away. After a while, the restaurant turned into a dance floor, and the band on the left played classical and melodious dance music. Carl carefully adjusted his bow tie and smoothed out every wrinkle on his dress. With a funny smile on his face, he slowly walked in front of Cedric and stretched out his right hand. "Come on, the loser will keep his promise. My dear lady, would you please have the honor to dance with me?" After that, without waiting for Cedric to respond, Carol suddenly grabbed Cedric's fingers and pulled him into his arms. Then he interlocked the fingers of his right hand, put his left hand around the other's waist, and spoke softly. "Don't think about it anymore. Just think about it with your fragrant pumpkin brain. I'm afraid this big head is going to turn into pumpkin pie. I've already eaten a lot today, and I don't want to eat dessert. I promise you, after this banquet is over, I will solve your doubts." "Really?" Cedric looked at Cole with confusion and a little anger. Carl just smiled. "Just use your intuition to guess, and you'll know, right?" As we were talking, after the violin prelude ended, the entrance of the cello marked the official start of the dance. Under the bright lights, the dance floor was filled with an incredible magic, but it was different from before. The source of the magic this time is not the traditional young lovers. The two young men dance gracefully on the dance floor, like the brightest stars in the night sky. Their dance steps were light and elegant. Every spin was like a carefully choreographed ballet, and every eye contact was filled with a hint of playfulness, complaint, and anger. Cedric can't dance, but he can act as a puppet, and Carl, sitting opposite him, is the most perfect puppeteer in the world at this moment. Cole was dressed in a black tuxedo, his movements were smooth and powerful, and every rotation, turn and leg lift revealed an aristocratic calmness and confidence. His hands were full of strength, holding Cedric completely in his palms, and every movement was just right. The rhythm of the music danced under their feet, and their bodies rose and fell with the melody, as if they were having a silent conversation with the music. The other guests in the center of the dance floor unconsciously made room for them and stood in the distance, quietly appreciating this feast of beauty. As the last note fell, the two young men slowly stopped. Cedric's face immediately turned red, and he didn't know whether it was because he was tired or shy. Carl deliberately took 2 steps back, came to the edge of the dance floor, bowed deeply and gracefully, then looked up at the other party and spoke using magic. "Now, answer me, did I lie to you?" Chapter 189 Brooklyn Blocks. Cedric opened the tinfoil packaging of the burger in front of him, opened his mouth, and took a big bite. The beef patty mixed with cottage cheese, plus the carbohydrate pleasure brought by the whole wheat bread, made him feel extremely satisfied. This was the first time he tasted this kind of food, which was different from the KFC and McDonald's that Carol had taken him to before. Compared to industrialized food, the chef mixes minced beef with onions and cheese and then fries it into pancakes in butter, paired with freshly baked bread, pickles and tomato slices. It can bring greater satisfaction. Sitting on the street and tasting the beef burgers made in the shabby food truck is a different experience. Just like where they are now, old wooden houses and bumpy and cracked asphalt roads, there are all kinds of garbage everywhere, as well as a few tents not far away, and homeless people sleeping next to them. Brooklyn, one of the poorest neighborhoods in New York, is known worldwide for its high unemployment rate, poor housing conditions, and extremely high crime rate. Cedric had read about this community in books, but when he actually stepped into this neighborhood, he was shocked. He also had to admit that he was indeed shocked. Especially since he was attending a presidential candidate banquet at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel the night before. But today he stepped into the most dangerous neighborhood in the United States, which made him feel a little uneasy. Compared to his uneasiness, Carl seemed much calmer, even a little happy, from the moment he entered the Brooklyn neighborhood. Until they walked to the dining car to have their meal, countless people of all kinds greeted Cole warmly when they saw him along the way. For example, the owner of this food truck is a middle-aged Mexican man. His figure is seriously out of shape, judging from his appearance alone, His weight is at least over 300 pounds. As soon as he saw Karl, he immediately hugged him in his arms like a bear hugging a tree, and said happily, while patting his chest, "Long time no see, Mr. Hohenzollern. You are finally back. Do you have any new project to work on with the brothers?" Karl just smiled and said nothing. After quickly ordering the food, he took Cedric to sit aside. Using the spoon in his hand, he kept stirring the coke in front of him. Cedric finally finished eating 4 beef burgers. Feeling satisfied, he finally had time to ask Karl, "Why did you bring me here?" Karl just raised his eyelids slightly, glared at the other person, and said unhappily, "Of course it's to eat, but I only had this thought after someone ate all of the 2 burgers that I was supposed to have. It was completely shattered." Huh. Cedric scratched his face awkwardly and muttered softly, "I thought those 4 burgers were ordered for me." Karl snorted unhappily and stopped dwelling on the matter. Instead, he pointed around and asked, "During this journey, have you had any new feelings? Have your doubts from yesterday changed?" "What? Feelings? What doubts?" Cedric's eyes revealed a clear stupidity. Karl looked into the other person's eyes and couldn't help but put his hand on his forehead and shook his head. "It seems that heuristic education doesn't have much effect on you, your pumpkin-scented head. It's amazing how you lose 99% of your ability to think once you touch food. Isn't there still 1%? Cedric said unconvinced. "Yes, there is still 1% left." Karl's tone was full of sarcasm. "Use the remaining 1% to think about how to eat my burger into your stomach. HMPH. Cedric turned his head and snorted in protest. Karl ignored the other party's temper, turned around and pointed at the surroundings and spoke in a rare serious tone. "Well, I'm not blaming you. Just eat it. Although I can't understand why you waste so much feed, but I can still afford to support you, but you can't fall behind in your studies. I brought you here mainly to answer your question yesterday. Why? Can I easily guess the theme of the presidential candidate's speech?" Hearing this, Cedric turned his head back and followed the direction of Karl's finger and began to observe the surrounding environment. "What did you see?" Karl asked. "It's run down and depressed. I know it's not nice to say this, but the people living around here don't seem to be white," Cedric replied. "Very. But go deeper." Karl continued to ask. Cedric shook his head and said helplessly, "I can't tell. I've read about this community in books, but it's really different when I actually come here, except for the surrounding environment, which is pretty much the same. The public security seems to be much better. At least it's not as exaggerated as what is written in the books. Of course, white boy, with Mr. Hohenzollern here, no gang would dare to cause trouble in broad daylight, unless they don't want to continue to be in this business. Even the cops have to behave themselves, or their bodies will be found outside the fence of the New York Expressway tomorrow." This time it was the Mexican boss who spoke, and he spoke vividly in English with a strong Mexican accent. At the same time, he placed 2 freshly made beef burgers in front of Karl and used his plump right hand as he left. He patted Cedric's shoulder and instructed, "Don't eat secretly this time. But you have such a small stomach, but you can actually fit so much food. You are quite talented. There's an eating contest at the Pink Nightclub tonight. Do you want to go? Or you can go with Mr. Hohenzollern. He is a distinguished guest there." Halfway through his words, the Mexican boss realized that he might have said something wrong, so he quickly shut up and clasped his hands together. He made a pleading gesture to Karl. Karl didn't mean to blame the other party. He waved his hand gently, indicating that the other party should go and do his work. Looking at Cedric, who was so shocked that he couldn't say a word, he spoke with some pride. "Ask whatever you want to ask." After saying that, he slowly opened the tinfoil packaging of the hamburger in front of him, but he didn't even have the time to take a bite. Cedric suddenly asked, "What is that Pink Nightclub? Is it some kind of restaurant?" Cough. Cough. Karl coughed violently, and the Mexican boss at the table burst into laughter. His movements were so loud that his fat body was shaking with his laughter. "It's not a restaurant," Karl said with embarrassment on his face, and asked angrily, "You shouldn't have this kind of doubt. You shouldn't continue to ask why this neighborhood is so quiet." So, let's continue discussing your doubts from yesterday. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190, The Arrival of Night. Oh yes, you promised to answer my doubts for me, you promised, Cedric murmured softly, as if he had finally come to his senses, but while speaking, his eyes were fixed on the other unopened beef burger. Seeing this, Karl could only sigh deeply, and put another burger in front of the other person with helplessness on his face. Eat. Once food is present, your brain has no ability to think. No matter how much you say, it will be useless. Eat. Quickly. It's better to watch it once than to talk about it. I still have important business to do. After saying that, Cole was even considerate enough to open the wrapping paper of the hamburger for the other party to make it clear that he allowed the other party to eat the hamburger. There were two more people sitting on the side of the road, accompanied by the passing vehicles, and the unpleasant exhaust fumes finished both burgers quickly. Before leaving, Karl left $200 for the boss and gave him some thoughtful instructions. Give this money to your grandmother for safekeeping. If I find you using the money to buy medicine again, Tom and the others will help me cut off the remaining 3 fingers on your left hand. After saying this, under Cedric's stunned gaze, the Mexican boss took off the glove on his left hand. Using the only 3 fingers he had left, he carefully put the $200 into his arms. Did you really cut off his fingers? Cedric asked in surprise. What greeted him was not an answer. He was rudely stuffed into the car by Carol. When he turned around again, Karl, who was sitting in the driver's seat, had already fastened his seatbelt. He turned the key to start the engine, stepped on the accelerator, and sped away. As the dilapidated wooden houses disappeared through the car window, the car was no longer visible. Karl, who was sitting in the driver's seat, held the steering wheel with his left hand, supported his face with his right hand, and looked ahead and muttered, "Take a good look at the dark side of this country. I cut off 2 fingers of that guy, but it saved his life, because otherwise he would have been addicted to opioids and couldn't get out of it. His grandmother should have died a long time ago due to his domestic violence." As Carol said this, and the car engine roared, the true face of this neighborhood slowly appeared in front of Cedric. The first thing that catches your eye is Williamsburg. The walls of the surrounding buildings are covered with colorful graffiti left behind by the hippie movement in the 70s. However, as time passes by, art's former glory is long gone, replaced by dilapidated storefronts. There were homeless people everywhere. In front of an old coffee shop, several black teenagers in ostentatious clothes were smashing the windows of the coffee shop with baseball bats. When they saw Karl's car, they stopped what they were doing and made a strange salute gesture towards the car. "Ah. They saluting us?" Cedric asked doubtfully. Karl, who was driving with one hand, had a smug smile on his face. He raised his right hand and pointed forward, laughing. "Of course. They are all my men. Welcome to Brooklyn. Welcome to my neighborhood." As soon as the words fell, the afternoon sun slowly set, and night fell. A white Honda sedan was speeding through the dim streets. In the distance, the sound of sirens and jazz music from the bar could be heard. Cole was driving very slowly. It would have been more like he was taking a walk with the vehicle than driving. Cedric, who was sitting in the passenger seat, had a completely silent look on his face at this moment, observing every corner of the street. Completely different from before the sun sets. When night falls, it feels as if every street is in darkness. There is some hidden sin inside, and there is a faint smell of blood in the air. The streets, which are deserted during the day, become bustling at night with countless young boys and girls dressed in strange clothes. Groups of people gathered around bonfires, holding various alcoholic beverages and tube-shaped objects he had never seen before. Smoke is a standard feature of this group of people. Shrouded in the sweet smoke, their expressions begin to change from normal to blurred. In the end, they were like the Walking Dead, gathered together and reveled wildly, as if possessed by ghosts. As the vehicle drives along, the surrounding scenery is constantly changing. The once prosperous industrial area is now left with only empty factories and rusty machines in those abandoned houses. One or two people can be seen from time to time, and they are as thin as skeletons. They gathered together and injected some liquid into their arms with dirty syringes. Then his body began to twitch, and eventually he fell to the ground. Finally, in front of a freshly painted factory building, Karl stepped on the brakes and got out of the car with an expressionless face. He opened the car door for Cedric and patted his face. "Wake up, we're here." Cedric got out of the car, as if he had just woken up from a dream, stood there looking at the two people lying on the ground in the distance, hesitated for a long time and asked, "What's wrong with them? Should we call a doctor for them?" Hearing this, Karl also glanced in that direction, then snorted coldly and shook his head. "No, when night falls, not to mention doctors, even the police may not be willing to go deep into the community. Those two guys must have bought impure drugs. It looks like they won't survive the night. Let's go. We still have things to do." "What did you say?" Cedric grabbed Karl's right hand, stared at him in disbelief, and asked with a hint of expectation, "Can you guarantee that these crimes have nothing to do with you?" Karl, whose right hand was held, slowly turned his head to look at Cedric, and asked with a mocking smile, "Haven't you read about this in books? I thought you were prepared for the destructive power of words. Wouldn't it be better to see it with your own eyes?" "It's different." Cedric tried to deny it. "What's the difference?" Karl's tone also became tough. "The two guys lying there, and the people who died on that land in Gaza, there is no fundamental difference. Yesterday you saw the best of this country. Today, you have only seen the other side of the coin. It is just two sides of the same coin. There is no need to feel scared, nervous or guilty. Be brave. I believe in you." "What about you?" Cedric asked again. "You haven't answered my question just now. Do these have anything to do with you? Which problem is it? Is it yesterday's problem or just now's problem?" Karl didn't rush to answer, but pointed to the open factory gate. "Come on. I'll tell you the answers to both questions inside." Chapter 192, The Cat That Bites. "Then tell me what is going on with this factory. What exactly are the products you produce? You use drugs to ruin a person's life. This is truly disgraceful, Mr. Hohenzollern." Cedric, who was pressed down on the sofa, roared angrily. Karl, who was called out by his full name by the other party, was really a little angry. He took a deep breath and tried to stay calm and spoke. "I repeat, this is all a legal business. I'm not that low class, and I don't bother to do that kind of thing. I was making money from drugs, but I was not a low-end drug dealer. You still don't admit it." Cedric roared, turned his head with effort, opened his mouth wide and bit Karl's right wrist hard. Wipe. The bite was really hard. Karl withdrew his right hand because of the pain and grimaced in pain as he looked at the red wound. Cedric took the opportunity to break free from the other party's restraints and ran straight to the office door. "As soon as my right hand touched the door handle, I heard an urgent shout from behind. 'Colloportus, imprison him quickly.' The light hit his back, and he fell straight to the ground, as if he was tied up by invisible ropes. Karl didn't waste any time talking to him. He just carried the guy on his shoulder and raised his bitten right hand. He slapped the other's butt hard and cursed. "How dare you bite me, you fool who doesn't want to use your brain. I will definitely teach you a lesson today." As Karl was about to throw Cedric on the sofa and ask him to explain, the door of the office was suddenly opened from the outside. Dean ran into the office in a panic, and as soon as he stopped, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. "I saw my eldest brother carrying another boy and was about to throw him roughly onto the sofa. Watching the boy's actions, there seemed to be some bondage element in it, and seeing that he had seen something he shouldn't have, he could only cough lightly and explain awkwardly, 'Sorry, sir. I left my car keys here. I'll come get them. I'll be leaving right away.' After saying that, he was about to pretend to take the key from the cupboard next to him, but before he could reach out his hand, he was greeted with 3 sharp gunshots. 3 9mm parabolic pistol bullets flew past the dreadlocks on his head and shattered the energy-saving incandescent light bulb behind him. "Roll." "No problem, boss." With a rebuke and a response, Dean slid out of the office smoothly. Before leaving, He not only closed the door considerately, but also locked it from the outside. Then he slowly sat down along the door panel, patted his chest, and gasped for breath. It was so thrilling that he almost got silenced. In the office, Cedric was thrown roughly on the sofa by Karl, and then he was like a shrimp that had just been fished out of the water. After tossing and turning on the sofa, Cole ran to the desk beside him, opened the drawer, and searched through it. He walked up to Cedric with a pile of documents. Look carefully. This is the certificate issued by the American Medical Association. This is a certification made by the US Drug Enforcement Administration. This is a customs declaration form, and most importantly, the tax record of this factory. Open your eyes and take a good look. It's both English, and you should be able to understand it. When did I lie to you? Karl threw documents in front of Cedric, but his movements and angles were a bit tricky. He rolled the documents into sticks and spanked Cedric hard on the butt each time he took out a copy. Cedric listened to the other party's confident words and could roughly guess that he seemed a little reckless just now. But he was still a little unconvinced, and like a huge caterpillar, he curled up his body and tried hard to pupate. He tried hard to turn his body around, then used his mouth to turn the pages of the documents and began to read. Karl sat in the chair behind the desk, looking at his right wrist with a distressed look on his face. There was a red and purple tooth mark on it, and it still hurts a little. About half an hour later, Cedric felt that his saliva was almost absorbed by the papers. He then stopped and asked with some lack of confidence, even if your actions are completely legal from a legal perspective, I have personally seen the raw materials for the drugs you produced. Those are all psychotropic drugs, which can cause people to become seriously addicted. How do you explain that? Seeing that the other party was still not convinced, Karl had no choice but to stand up and take out a fresh plant from his ring. He asked, placing it in front of Cedric. You should know what this is, right? Dream bubble flower. Cedric recognized the plant in front of him immediately. Isn't this thing used to make sleeping potions? What do you use it for? Of course it's used to make medicine, Karl said unhappily. This potion has the property of making people have a good dream. Another little known feature is that it can replicate the effects of certain drugs, but only in the form of dreams. With the help of Professor Snape, I mixed this potion with those opioid raw materials so that it could replicate the anesthetic effect on the human brain. It can only be presented in an illusory way, giving people the same high as when taking drugs, but without causing actual damage to the brain. It's like eating 0-calorie candy when losing weight. It's mainly a trick on the brain, and it doesn't really have calories. Cedric was silent, mumbling with his head down. Then, why didn't you tell me earlier? I misunderstood you. Why didn't you say so earlier? Karl angrily pulled Cedric up from the sofa and pinched his face tightly. He roared angrily. Yesterday, at dinner, you reminded me that using magic in the Muggle world is a very dangerous act. Why did your brain forget this today? Didn't I say that I never make promises to anyone easily, but once I make a promise, I will definitely keep it. I said I would not deceive you, but you doubted me. Cedric, whose face was sprayed with Karl's saliva, turned his head away somewhat embarrassedly, but still spoke with some dissatisfaction. But what about this community? And whose dog are you going to hang? Whose cafe are you going to burn down? Why are you doing this? I want answers to what is going on here. Answer. Karl shook his head helplessly and pulled a chair over from the side. Then he placed Cedric neatly on the sofa like a giant doll. He sat opposite the other person, took a deep breath and then spoke. If you want answers, then you should ask questions first. I won't have to do anything today so that I can answer you properly. Mr. Diggory. Chapter 193 Monopoly Business. Cedric looked at Karl's serious expression and the fact that he addressed himself as Mr. Diggory. He also knew that Karl should be very angry now, but the doubts in his heart drove him to ask, after sorting out his mood. First, you have to tell me where the raw materials for these psychotropic drugs come from, even though you have the customs declaration form. But I think according to the current laws of the US federal government, the importation of these drugs should be a very complicated process. You probably didn't do it through formal channels. How Do you know it wasn't through formal channels? Carol's face was full of dissatisfaction. Am I so unruly in your eyes? No. Cedric shook his head seriously and said, you certainly wouldn't completely break the rules, but I've been with you for such a long time. Some rules have been summarized. That is, when the existing rules are in your favor, you will defend and abide by them without hesitation. But once the rules are against you, you will try every possible way to find loopholes in the rules. If there are no loopholes to find, then jump out of the existing rules, or just destroy them. As he spoke, Cedric stared into his eyes and spoke every word seriously. The rule of importing through formal channels is not very beneficial to you, because it will increase your costs. Once it comes to your profits, you will inevitably use some means to maximize your profits. Carol coughed lightly and looked dimly at the silly guy in front of him, wondering how he had become smarter. After a moment's silence, he spoke calmly. Congratulations, Mr. Diggory, you guessed it right. The raw materials for these opioids were indeed not imported through formal channels. The vast majority of it was obtained through the US Drug Enforcement Administration. What? Cedric's eyes were full of confusion. People from the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration helped you import the raw materials of opioids? Is there anything more ridiculous in the world than this? Carol looked at the other person's face full of disbelief, stretched out his right hand and patted the other person's forehead, and said helplessly, wasn't he quite smart just now? How come his IQ has dropped so much now? This is really hard to understand. The Federal Drug Enforcement Administration seizes nearly 2 to 3 tons of various opioids each year, and these drugs need to be destroyed. It will cost a lot of money. I will take these raw materials to the factory and process them into X1 drug addiction treatment drugs. If we sell them on the market, we can get a lot of money, which can help them save the money spent on the destruction work. I can also take out 2% of the profits every year to sponsor the fund to improve the welfare of the police officers. It's a win-win deal, so of course they are willing to help me. Hearing this, Cedric was shocked again. He had never thought that business could be done this way, but after thinking about it carefully, if Carol didn't lie to him, then this seems to be a good thing. He breathed a sigh of relief and said slowly, okay, I believe you are not lying. So my second question is, are you doing this for those poor guys? I don't deny that you are doing a good thing for society by doing this, but I'm a little suspicious of your motives. Hearing this, Carol was really about to explode. He rubbed Cedric's face hard with his right hand and complained unhappily. I also have some doubts about why I greeted you when I first met you. I must have had water in my head at that time. That's why I would keep a traitor like you by my side. Now let me tell you, Mr. Diggory, you don't have to doubt my motivation. I do this simply to make money, and you don't have to thank me. It satisfies your inner conscience and does a good thing for society. I can guarantee you 100% of that. These drugs are like 0-calorie sugar for weight loss, but they don't change anything. Why? Cedric, whose face was twisted, couldn't help but continue asking. Even though he was gasping in pain, Carl continued to explain, while punishing the other party, because it's very simple. Those who are addicted to drugs will not completely change their lives because of the emergence of these new drugs. Although these drugs only require 1 or 2 courses of treatment, they can completely help them quit their physical dependence on those drugs. But what about their lives? What about their spirits? Those who have no decent jobs and are abandoned in the corners of society. The only result is that they will slowly rot in these illusions. Besides, my medicine is not cheap, and they can't afford it for a long time. At this point, Karl simply laid his cards on the table, spreading his hands and speaking, and let me tell you, the reason I want to cooperate with the D is ostensibly to support the fight against drugs. In fact, it is just to reduce the competition of similar products in the market, so that their inferior drugs cannot enter the market. What kind of monopoly structure will be formed by a regular drug that is produced by a regular company, certified by multiple parties, and has almost 0 side effects? Monopoly is always the most profitable. You are right. I only like money. Are you satisfied with this explanation now, Karl? turned his head away, and no longer looked at the other person. Cedric lowered his head, remaining silent with a painful expression. He really couldn't understand if all the tragedies he saw in Gaza could be simply divided into good and evil. If everything we see on the Crimean Peninsula can be explained by past history. But during this nearly 1 year of study, he read countless Muggle books, both on politics and economics. Those works are full of praise for the country he currently lives in. Even before I came to the United States, I read a book in which the author argued from many perspectives. This shows that we have reached the end of history and the American people have found the most perfect system. It will lead the development of the entire capitalist world and ultimately lead all of humanity. But what is the reality? Behind the prosperity of New York, the people of Brooklyn seem to live in another world. A road could actually divide two worlds. This was completely unimaginable before he came here. Countless doubts accumulated in his mind, and finally Cedric slowly raised his head, looked at Carol with a hint of tears and asked, "But why? Why does it have to be like this? Why can't everyone just get along? I can't figure it out. I really can't figure it out." Chapter 194 Questions and Answers. Looking at Cedric, who almost collapsed, Karl seemed very calm, because he knew that this was the most normal thing. When he took him to Gaza and saw the most direct cruel side of the world. Although the other party's worldview is also facing collapse, this will not cause the other party's psychological defenses to collapse. It's the same, even if it's an ordinary person who has a good life and a kind heart, because they have someone to vent their anger on. In that matter, they can clearly distinguish between good and evil and condemn the perpetrators, thereby giving their conscience a chance to survive. But now, the situation is completely different. Everything that is happening before our eyes, in the final analysis, has no right or wrong at all. It's like an ordinary person finally graduates from the ivory tower and enters the society with a naive and romantic mentality. Within less than a year or two, I suddenly realized that everything I had learned before was complete bullshit. This society is running quietly and orderly according to another set of unspoken rules. Cedric's current behavior is a manifestation of his inability to accept reality, or it can also be called a lack of maturity. But in the final analysis, it can be explained in a simple way. That is, he is still a good person. Well, since he is a good guy, you can be the bad guy yourself. Carol took a deep breath, looked at the boy who was about to break in front of him, and stretched out his hands to hold the other's face. He raised his head, looked into his eyes, and spoke calmly. "If you can't figure it out, don't think about it. Use your eyes to see, and your ears to listen. I never expect you to understand everything now. I don't want you to become like me. You are a kind-hearted person, and that's enough. But I'm not a good person, so I have to answer all your previous questions." Hearing this, Cedric instinctively wanted to escape from what Karl said next. He tried hard to break free from Karl's restraints, but Karl was unwilling to let go and held the other's chin tightly with both hands. He forced the other person to look at him and spoke coldly. "I'll tell you why this is happening. Why, even with this new drug that has zero side effects, those people still can't get rid of their addiction to drugs. Because it's simple. It's not them who are wrong. It's this world where people can only find comfort in a handful of powder. Those who are high up in the world criticize the drug traffickers and the farmers in their neighboring countries who grow drugs to resist these immigrants who sneak into their country from neighboring countries. But they never think that it is precisely because of the existence of their country. As a result, those poor farmers are unable to grow normal crops to earn enough food and clothing. But they never thought that every time the New York Stock Exchange rose by 1,000 points, countless factories were closed. Those laid off workers can no longer support a family of 3 and a dog by working alone. They never thought that they were in a deliberately constructed struggle with gender confrontation and racial discrimination. The abortion rights dispute, the gun rights dispute, countless conflicts have been created, and the streets have divided the neighborhoods. It divides people into different worlds. The rich live in villas, enjoy security in their American dream. What about these people in Brooklyn? They are using their granted right to bear arms to kill each other in this mud pit. I'm not as kind as you, and I don't want to save everyone, but I will never allow the people around me to rot in this dirty mud pit. Ah. You satisfied with my answer? Do you understand it? My dear Mr. Diggory, Cedric felt like his head was going to explode. As an outstanding student at Hogwarts, he was not a stupid guy at all. On the contrary, he is very sensitive to everything around him, and he has extraordinary empathy and the ability to feel others' feelings. That's why he tried his best to be gentle and sincere to everyone around him, not because he wanted to gain anything. That's simply because he wants others to do it to him, so he will do it to others. But Karl shattered his world time and time again. Now he really didn't know what to do. He could only respond to Carol with silence. Karl looked at the silent Cedric, feeling a little disappointed, a little sad, and a little distressed. He had never wanted someone to agree with his ideas so much as he did at this moment. He had never wanted others to support him like this before. In his past life, he had long been accustomed to being alone. His principle is to do everything for his own benefit, but now this principle seems to be shaken. The two of them were stuck in a stalemate until Cedric lowered his head and asked hoarsely, "Then, what is your purpose? You can't just do it for money. You must have your own ideas." "I want to hear the voice from the deepest part of your heart, and I believe you won't lie to me." Karl began to get a little nervous. Even at certain times in the past, facing interrogation by a senior New York state prosecutor, even in some dangerous and life-threatening moments, he never felt nervous. No, it's not nervousness, it's fear. A thought flashed through Carol's mind, but he quickly denied it. He was unwilling to admit that he was a little scared. He was afraid that what he was going to say next would completely remove the young man in front of him from his life. After being silent for an unknown amount of time, he finally decided not to lie to the other party and spoke seriously. "My ultimate goal is not that noble. I want to really take the gamble." "What do you mean?" Cedric raised his head slowly and looked at Karl again. Karl continued speaking slowly as usual. "It's a metaphor. I want to accumulate funds and step onto the world's highest level gambling table. You can understand it as that. I want to stand at the top of the pyramid of human society, and completely, I can't be anyone's puppet. I want to play my cards myself, so I will go back to the magical world, because I know that with my identity in the muggle world, I will never be able to achieve the status I want. Perhaps in the next 30 years or so, I can take advantage of the degree of division that has accumulated in American society. You became the president of the United States in a way that no one could have imagined, but I can't wait for a country to go downhill. Someone has to step on the gas, and I'm just going to take off the brakes as well. I want to be the leader of the wizarding world. One of the richest men in the world, with these two identities, stepped onto the highest gambling table and played it thoroughly." Having said that, Karl did not open his arms to enjoy the admiration brought by his bold words as he did in the past. Instead, he lowered his head and dared not look Cedric in the eye. He was waiting for the other party's answer, and he had never waited so anxiously. But after waiting for so long, all I got was a complaint from Cedric. "I understand, but can you remove the magic from me?" Karl looked up at the other person, wanting to say something, but unable to open his mouth. He could only snap his fingers lightly to release the restraints on the other person. Before he could react, a warm hug was thrown into his arms, but he still waited for the other party's answer. Chapter 195. Cedric in the palm of his hand. The sun appeared on the horizon of Manhattan Island, and the neon lights that seemed to be eternal in the night gradually went out from east to west. The last trace of perfume mixed with alcohol in the air gradually dissipated under the sunlight, and New York also changed from a seductive and mature queen. I became an early rising sporty girl. The atmosphere of the bright lights and feasting gradually disappeared, and the sunlight, carrying the fragrance of the grass in Central Park, announced the arrival of a new day. Cedric felt the warmth of the sun on his face and slowly stood up from the big bed in the presidential suite of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. He had just sat down leaning against the pillow. His sleepy soul had not yet officially woken up when he heard the doorbell. "Dear Mr. Diggory, this is the wake-up call that Mr. Hohenzollern has booked for you. May I come in now, please?" "Come in," Cedric answered habitually, but his mind was still in a mess at the moment. He looked around. While sitting on the bed. I didn't see that familiar figure, and looking at the luxurious decoration in the hotel, the confusion in my mind became even worse. It seemed as if everything I saw yesterday was just a bubble, and when I woke up, I seemed to be back to my familiar life. Just as he was daydreaming, a waiter in a tuxedo, white shirt and red bow tie came. He pushed an exquisite dining cart into the room. And when he saw Cedric, he bowed deeply and gracefully. Then he spoke. "This is the wake-up call service ordered by Mr. Hohenzollern, providing you with breakfast today." Hearing this, Cedric was about to get out of bed, but the other party quickly stopped him. "Please, stay in bed. There is no need to get up. You can eat in bed." As he spoke, the waiter opened the buckle on the dining table, and this exquisite dining cart immediately turned into an even more exquisite small dining table. The waiter placed the exquisite little dining table steadily in front of Cedric, then opened the lid and pointed at the exquisite food while introducing it. "Today's breakfast is mainly sour cream oatmeal, paired with the freshest salmon, and the dessert is passion fruit strawberry cake. The drink is the purest grass-fed milk, and according to Mr. Hohenzollern's instructions, considering that you are currently in the body management period, all ingredients are made with sugar substitutes and fat-free margarine, so the taste may be lacking. Please forgive me. It's very good, really." Looking at the rich and exquisite breakfast in front of him, Cedric could only nod awkwardly. He was not good at dealing with strangers in the first place, let alone the other party being so enthusiastic, but it was awkward. He was still a little angry. Karl was really a big mouth, and had to spread the news of his out-of-shape figure everywhere. Can't you have a little privacy? You are such a disgusting guy. While Cedric was still blaming Karl in his heart, the waiter took out another piece of gold from his coat pocket. He took out a black card and presented it respectfully with both hands. "Oh, there's one more thing. Mr. Hohenzollern told me to go to the balcony on the rooftop after you finish breakfast. This is a special VIP elevator card. Please keep it." Cedric took the card with his right hand and threw it aside casually, so he picked up the fork and was about to enjoy the delicious food in front of him. Then he suddenly remembered that the other person was still here, so he looked up at the waiter with some embarrassment. "You can go first. I'm not used to someone watching me eat." "Of course." The waiter turned around and pushed the food cart away very politely. When he reached the door, he turned around and said respectfully, "If you need any service, just press the button next to the bed and we will serve you wholeheartedly at any time." After saying that, he closed the door gently, without even a trace of unnecessary noise. Cedric looked at the gate and couldn't help feeling a little emotional. No wonder those people like to enjoy it. This kind of service really made people feel different. However, no high-end service is as important to him as the cake in front of him. Without the interference of off-site factors as a typical Hufflepuff, he had to start the most important thing in his life, enjoying delicious food. After eating and drinking, Cedric was about to call for service when the door was opened again. The waiter was holding a set of clothes packed in a transparent plastic bag. She slowly walked over to Cedric, placed her clothes on the nightstand next to the bed, and put away the table in front of her. "How do you know? I've already finished eating." Looking at the waiter, who was busy cleaning up, Cedric asked in surprise. The waiter spoke calmly while working. "I'm sorry to confuse you. Mr. Hohenzollern asked me to leave a schedule at the service desk when I left this morning. It shows your approximate wake-up time and the average time it takes, including the cake you used. It was also made by our chef himself according to the recipe he left behind. We shouldn't have been so abrupt, but Mr. Hohenzollern has asked us to take you to see him as soon as possible. We don't have much time, so please forgive us." Hearing this, Cedric froze in place, while the waiter remained elegant and calm as he cleared the table. He turned around and left, while whispering a reminder that set of clothes was prepared for you by Mr. Hohenzollern. According to the schedule he left, it will usually take you about 3 minutes and 49 seconds to change clothes. Once you have changed your clothes, you can leave the room directly. The service staff who will guide you will be waiting outside the door. Have a nice day. After saying that, he left directly. It was not until the door closed for the second time that Cedric realized that he seemed to be controlled by someone again. The other party even has accurate records of the time I changed my clothes. What on earth does this guy want to do? Feeling angry and resentful, he deliberately increased the time he took to change his clothes, and it took him less than 2 minutes to put on the clothes. I pushed the door open and, under the guidance of the waiter, took the elevator to the observation balcony on the top floor. As soon as the elevator door opened, he saw Karl drinking and talking with a young man. Cedric strode over and deliberately stood in front of Carol. Karl looked the other person up and down, then checked the time on his watch and looked at the young man opposite with a smile. Mr. John Macduff, it seems that you have lost this bet. I will not hesitate to give you the 1% of the shares. Thank you for your generosity. The gentleman named Macduff looked at Cedric resentfully, then stood up and walked to his side, patted him on the shoulder and said, "You don't need to be so anxious. Your cuffs and collar need some tidying up." After saying that, under Cedric's puzzled gaze, Mr. Macduff took out his wand and used apparition to leave. It was not until this moment that Cedric realized that he had been tricked by Cole again. Whether it was the waiter or this breakfast. This was all arranged by this annoying guy. He had expected that I should have shortened my dressing time out of spite. He even became a bargaining chip for the other party to make profits. Feeling that he was being used, Cedric sat on the sofa beside him angrily. He turned his head away and didn't look at Karl. What are you angry about? Chapter 196. 27 Galleons. Karl held a cup of freshly brewed black tea and looked at the sulking Cedric nonchalantly. Cedric was completely furious at such a perfunctory apology. He turned around and scolded loudly. "You actually took advantage of my privacy, set up a trap to deceive me, and even used this to gamble with others. You've really gone too far. This is betrayal, naked betrayal, betrayal." Karl took a sip of the black tea in the cup and said to the pumpkin head with ruffled hair in front of him with a funny look, "What did I betray? From the perspective of classmates, we are best friends. I didn't betray our friendship. From the perspective of the organization, I'm your superior and you are my subordinate. The only way for betrayal to happen is for you to betray me. How can this word be used on me? Apart from this, is there any other relationship between you and me that could be betrayed?" "You." Cedric pointed at Carol angrily, but couldn't say a word for a long time. In the end, he could only cross his arms across his chest. Sitting on the luxurious sofa beside him, sulking. Carol picked up the teapot, poured the other person a cup of freshly brewed black tea, and carefully added milk. He opened the sugar bowl beside him and scooped 2 large spoonfuls of sugar into it with a silver spoon. After stirring evenly, push the teacup in front of the other person. "Okay, stop being a child. It's you who was too stupid to fall into someone else's trap so easily. This is not Hogwarts. You should have been cautious about everything. If I hadn't delivered the breakfast, you might have taken some strange potion and fell asleep and were taken to some strange place. You believe everything a waiter you've never met tells you. You're so naive and cute. That's because he said you arranged it." Cedric muttered dissatisfiedly. Hearing this, Carol looked at the other person awkwardly. With his sharp hearing, he certainly heard what the other person muttered. An inexplicable feeling of guilt appeared in his heart, but it was impossible to apologize. So he changed the subject and pointed at the cup of black tea. "Okay, the black tea shipped from the eastern country of Wuai Mountain is very mellow and rich. Add whole milk and 2 spoons of sugar. This is a reward for you. Stop acting like a child." Looking at the steaming, sweet-smelling black tea in front of him, Cedric snorted coldly, reluctantly accepting the other party's apology. "As soon as I picked it up, before I had a chance to drink it, the annoying guy held his face and said something deliberately. You really don't have any vigilance at all. Are you so sure that what I added was sugar and not some special potion? Even if it's a potion, I'll drink it." Cedric was completely furious and drank the tea in one gulp. But he forgot one thing. It was freshly brewed black tea. The scalding hot tea burned him so much that he couldn't hold the cup. He was almost scalded on the chest by the tea, but fortunately Carol was quick-witted and pulled the other person to his sofa. "What's wrong with you today? It's like your brain is not working. I'm warning you, we still have a lot of work to do. Your current state is totally unacceptable. Looking at the spilled black tea on the table, Carol said with some complaints. Cedric, who was dragged to another sofa and fell, was still frightened and felt a little guilty. He looked at Carol, whose face was filled with anger, and his mind became confused, which was getting worse. He could no longer look directly at Carl's face, so he could only sit back on his sofa quietly. He asked, changing the subject, I'm still a little sleepy, so let's not talk about this for now. I've reluctantly forgiven you for what you did before. Now, tell me, who is that gentleman who used magic in public just now, and why is he here? You talking about Mr. John Macduff? Carl didn't pay much attention to Cedric's little action, and said calmly while sipping tea, if you have read some history books about the Magical Congress of the United States of America, you should have heard of the last name Macduff. Their family is one of the founders of the Magical Congress of the United States and enjoys a high status in the American wizarding world. He used to be the director of the United States Magical Enforcement Bureau. The first time I was arrested for magic, it was him who brought people to arrest me. We have been in contact since then. This time he came here to discuss the sales of the new batch of potions with me, as well as the issue of the distribution of benefits. After all, I still have to go back to Hogwarts to go to school, and I can't stay in the United States for a long time. We have to find a professional and reliable person to take charge of this side of the business. Yes, he is indeed a professional and reliable person, Cedric said sarcastically. Mr. Hohenzollern's way of interacting with others is also so unique. Other people's friends are at most classmates or strangers with similar interests. You are so good. Your way of interacting with others is to rely on being arrested. It's really eye-opening. Karl looked at Cedric in confusion, wondering what had happened to this kid. Why did he speak so much like an old acquaintance? Professor Snape, unable to figure it out, he stood up and walked to Cedric, stretched out his right hand, and touched his forehead. Then I used it on my own forehead for comparison. I don't have a fever. Why are you talking nonsense? After he finished speaking, he slapped the other person on the back of the head, stood up and sat back in his seat, then spoke seriously. Put away those negative emotions in your heart. I'm in the working period now, and I'm not in the mood to care about your trivial matters. Enjoy your last day in New York. We are flying to Germany tomorrow. Why are you going to Germany? Cedric, who was hit on the head, asked in confusion, touching the back of his head. Carol took a deep breath and said angrily, I told you yesterday that we were going to Germany to pass the drug testing there. How come you forgot everything? Didn't you sleep well last night? Your snoring was deafening. How come when you woke up it was as if you were drugged with some kind of magic potion? Is it possible that he has lost his memory? After saying this, Karl finished his tea, stood up again, walked to Cedric, and lifted him up directly from the sofa. She began to carefully tidy up the other person's clothes while complaining, be a little more cautious in the future. There's no need to be so anxious. As my subordinate, you must pay attention to the details of your clothes. Don't make it seem like I'm treating you unfairly. Cedric, who was enjoying Carol's service, couldn't help but mutter in a low voice while listening to the other party's complaints. I always helped you organize your clothes before, so what's wrong with you helping me once? Having said that, Mr. Hohenzollern's service is still very considerate, and he takes care of every detail of the clothes. After finishing the clothes, Cole took out an envelope and handed it to Cedric. What's this? Cedric took the envelope. It's your award. After all, I asked you to accompany me to the United States during these few days, so of course I have to pay you a salary. Open it and take a look. Are you satisfied? Karl said with a smile. Cedric quickly opened the envelope, and inside was a promissory note from the first savings bank in the wizarding world. The numbers on it were so familiar. 27,650. Galleons. Looking at that line of numbers, Cedric felt an unknown warmth in his heart, while Karl on the side looked at the expression on the other's face. I asked with some curiosity, by the way, I have already given you the money you wanted. Can you tell me what you want to buy with the money? Chapter 198 Old Father's Care. My name is Karl Hohenzollern, and I'm suffering from the most injustice in my life that I can do nothing about. Karl, who was in the Rosier family castle, looked at the scene happening in the living room in front of him and couldn't help but complain in his heart. Just yesterday, he and Cedric finished their trip in the United States and flew from New York to Paris on a special plane. Then I transferred from Paris to Berlin. The journey was very peaceful and tranquil, but I had to use the door key left by an old man. When teleported to this majestic castle high in the Alps, things start to take some strange turns. When Grindelwald saw Karl and Cedric for the first time, he immediately gave them a warm hug. He invited the other party with a smile to go to the reception room to enjoy breakfast, which was customized by him personally. The meal was luxurious and the dishes were rich. While he sat aside and communicated cordially with the other party, he was really enthusiastic to the extreme point, but maybe the object of his enthusiasm was wrong. Karl, who had been standing at the door of the reception room, looked at Cedric, who was a little overwhelmed by Grindelwald's warm hospitality. I could only stand at the door in a daze, but no one greeted me. For a moment, I felt dazed and began to wonder if my guess was wrong. Shouldn't I be the bloodline heir of this old deng? Why do I look like an adopted child now? Well, Cedric looks more like his biological son. Karl, who was furious, strode behind the two of them and snatched the cake that Grindelwald was about to give to Cedric. Said angrily, "What on earth do you want to do, you old man? I have been standing at the door for almost 5 minutes since I appeared in this castle. It's fine if you don't invite me in for a cup of tea, but why are you so obsessed with this guy? What's your purpose? Don't forget that I'm here. I have something important to talk to you about. I'm not in the mood to play this kind of game with you. Wait until after school starts. Go play with that old Dumbledore yourself." He said that he wanted to see the other party's panic expression when he made this revelation. But unexpectedly, Grindelwald had a calm expression on his face. He looked up at Karl quietly and said nonchalantly, "Since you can easily reveal these secrets to this young man, it seems that there is nothing wrong with my hospitality. He should have become a very important person in your life, so as your biological father, it is necessary to warmly entertain your son's future partner, especially when a certain jerk boy has absolutely no filial piety and doesn't care about the emotional needs of his old father." These words seemed to press the pause button on the entire reception hall, and Karl looked at the handsome old man in front of him in disbelief. Cedric also showed his greatest surprise. He stopped enjoying the food and looked at Grindelwald with a panicked look on his face. After more than 10 seconds of silence, Karl suddenly exploded and rushed towards Grindelwald's face with the cake in his hand. He growled with a red face, "What the hell are you talking about? Watch your words, you old man. He is my subordinate and comrade in arms, and my partner in the future life. You old bastard who is still in love after half a century, you deserve to die." Karl's movements were very fast, but Grindelwald's were even faster. He didn't take out his wand or even make any gestures. He simply used apparition to change his position, moving from the seat to Cedric's right to the left. Karl's cake attack missed, and half of the whole honey cake was thrown on Cedric's face. Cedric, whose face was covered with cake, finally reacted. His entire face turned red and hot, visibly like red hot porcelain. Even part of the cream on his face melted. He quickly turned to look at Grindelwald beside him and explained in a panic, "Sir, please don't say anything nonsense. Mr. Hohenzollern and I are just good friends. It's not what you think. What did I imagine?" Grindelwald looked at the panicked Cedric and asked deliberately with a smirk on his face, "I didn't use the word lovers. I just said you are life partners and your friendship will last a lifetime. So, aren't best friends life partners? Why are you two getting so excited? Or maybe it's not what I imagined, but you guys were planning to do that." "No." Cedric was completely panicked and tried desperately to explain, but he couldn't even finish a sentence. In the end, he could only look at Karl with tears in his eyes like a bullied seal. Karl could only stroke his forehead with his hand to express his helplessness, then looked at Cedric and said, "Go Wash your face and change your clothes first, then leave for a while and don't say a word to the old man. If you continue chatting with him, there will be no privacy left. Go away now." Hearing this, Cedric nodded obediently and left the living room under the guidance of a house elf point. But when he was about to leave, his eyes were fixed on the snacks he had not finished eating. "What? A useless guy," Karl said unhappily as he looked at the other person as he left point. But having said that, he was very honest and sat in the seat that Cedric had just sat in. Point I picked up the cutlery that the other person had used and started to enjoy the remaining cake. This was not because I was unrestrained point, but as he had flown half the world and hadn't eaten for a whole day, he was feeling a little hungry point. Besides, Cole was still very unhappy, and doing this would just disgust the old guy in front of him. Point. Before he could scoop up a piece of cake with a spoon, Grindelwald, who was standing beside him, supported his head and suddenly spoke. "Your relationship is definitely not ordinary. The two of you enjoy a cake together. Albus and I did the same thing in the past, but I want to give you a suggestion. It would be best if you could suddenly attack and steal his food when he is enjoying his meal. When he gets angry, give the food back to him. This will have a better effect." "I'm not eating anymore. I'm leaving." Carol threw the silver spoon in his hand heavily onto the plate, then stood up and prepared to leave. Point. It was only at this point that Grindelwald realized that he seemed to have gone a little too far, so he quickly stood up and grabbed Karl. Point. He changed his expression and said apologetically, "Well, why do you take your jokes so seriously? I'm already an old man. You should be more patient with me. Besides, you knew that I had left that cage, but you still didn't give me the care I deserved. Miss Wenderosier and that old fellow Dumbledore have received the gifts you purchased during your travels, but why am I the only one who doesn't have any gifts? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 199, The Mystery of Life Experience. Karl, who had been controlled by Grindelwald's words for 5 minutes, finally remembered that he seemed to have made such a mistake. Point. But this cannot be blamed on him. Since the old man left the cage, he has only spoken to him twice. Point. The last time was at Hogwarts, discussing how to lure Dumbledore out of the castle. After that conversation. Point. For the sake of confidentiality, he had never had much communication with the old guy, so much so that he had actually kind of forgotten the other person's existence. Point. To the extent that there was such obvious negligence in such a simple matter. But who is he? Karl Hohenzollern always adheres to the principle of never bowing his head and apologizing. Point. So after a brief thought, Karl spoke casually. "Gift? Why should I buy you a gift? Headmaster Dumbledore is my guardian and adoptive father in the legal sense of the British wizarding world. Aunt Wenderosier has always been a part of my family, both in the United States and in Europe. She raised and cared for me for 10 years. In my heart, she is like a mother. And who are you?" "The relationship between you and me has never been acknowledged by either party, and you have never spoken in person about my background." This answer was full of attack and silenced Grindelwald. After a long while, the handsome old man spoke in a sad and helpless tone. "Indeed, in your past life, I was just a stranger far away. I really didn't take care of you before, child. Regarding your background, I shouldn't be angry. I'll tell you, now that your background is very simple. It's because of a magic. You know the person I love is Al. There's no way between the two of us." "Stop," Karl shouted. "There's no need to elaborate on the following content. I don't want to hear you describe those scenes that are not suitable for children." Grindelwald, who was interrupted, looked at Cole with some embarrassment. The emotions that he had just built up with great difficulty. Point. He was a little confused at first, and after thinking for a long time, he just came clean and said with an indifferent look on his face, "You little brat, can't our conversation be more emotional? When you're with your partner, of course you can be so strong, but as someone who has experienced this, I need to remind you of the vulnerability that is exposed occasionally. It's often the most touching thing On a moonlit night, Mr. Hohenzollern, who is always tough and can be called the emperor of the magic world because of the fatigue from the day's work and the stimulation of alcohol, I showed my most vulnerable side in front of the person I love most, using drunken words, some nonsense and corny language. It is so touching, the sense of contrast, you know? This is a very important method. Shut up. Cole was so angry that he was furious. He looked at the handsome old man in front of him with anger on his face and roared madly, "I'm not in the mood to listen to your nonsense here. I seriously suspect that you are a wizard in disguise and are here to cause trouble for me. How come Grindelwald, who once terrified the entire European wizarding world, is now a stinky old man who loves to gossip about other people's private lives?" "It's a handsome old man," Green corrected me calmly. "Don't doubt your eyes, and don't doubt your ears. Ideals are ideals. Life is life. People are always used to having two faces, and I'm no exception. And the fact that you are so anxious and irritable right now has confirmed my guess. That child is indeed a very important person in your life. There is no way the relationship between him and you is just friendship. Otherwise, why would you be so excited? You have good taste, kid. In my heart, Al is more beautiful without her, but I have to admit that you have a very good taste. Cowl's defense was completely broken, and he began to greet Grindelwald with beautiful words. It was not until now that he realized that he had fallen into the enemy's trap. Since he stepped into the castle point, this petty-minded guy had been prepared from the beginning to make me lose control in revenge for not giving him a gift point. Now he no longer doubted whether the identity of the guy in front of him was Grindelwald. His only doubt now was, is the other person really related to me? I'm so generous, open-minded and sincere. How could I have such a petty gene in me? Grindelwald didn't care about Karl's vulgar words at all and comforted him nonchalantly. "Well, pay attention to your elegance, my child. Since you don't want to listen to my experience, I will tell you the answer to the question you want to know. Your origin is very simple. You were not born in the traditional sense. Your body came from a magic. You should have guessed the two sides of the gene. It's me and Al. When you were just an embryo, the magical world in Europe is not safe. For the hope of the saints, I handed you over to my distant cousin. She married very early on to the Hohenzollern family, the royal family of Germany. After the end of World War I in the Muggle world, the family went to the New World to escape disaster. This is also the origin of your current surname, but I didn't think of it. Your body can really give birth to an independent soul, but that will take many years." At this point, Grindelwald seemed to be moved by the scene. He stretched out his right hand and stroked Karl's long golden hair, looking into the other person's blue eyes. He sighed sincerely. "Your eyes are really very similar to his. I don't blame him for not telling me about you. I think when he saw your eyes, he might not feel much better than I do now. Thank you, Kit. You have left me with a blank piece of paper to write on, which should have been the best life ever." Carol's heart was also touched, and he couldn't help feeling a little guilty when he thought of the vulgar words he had just said. But just when he was about to convince himself and apologize to the other party, the guy in front of him suddenly changed the subject. His expression changed, like turning the pages of a book, and he spoke with a stern face. "But one thing is for sure, you didn't buy me a gift. I can't just let it go so easily. You didn't do your part, so you have to make it up to me. Put your plans on hold. Let's discuss my plan first." Karl's emotions were interrupted. Looking at Grindelwald, who had turned his face against him, he was secretly determined in his heart. "I must get some genetic samples from him and do a paternity test. This guy's definitely not my father in the biological sense. How could I be so petty? How could I hold a grudge like that?" Chapter 200 GRINDELWALD and -039 S small legacy. But no matter how much I complain, I still have to do it. But I consider that I don't communicate much with this old guy. Cole was still somewhat vigilant. After all, compared to Dumbledore, who had principles and bottom lines, this was the first generation Dark Lord who dominated the European wizarding world point, but he was never one to be easily offended, so he asked cautiously and tentatively, "What exactly is your plan? Don't be so wary of the kid." Grindelwald pressed his hand to his left chest, pretending to be sad. "Your skeptical tone is sad to hear. After all, I'm still your father. I must emphasize this point. Most of your genes come from me. Dumbledore can only be regarded as your mother. This cannot be changed. Let's get to the point." Cole was a little angry. "I'm not interested in listening to your past love history. Just tell me what conditions I need to agree to. You can help me complete the drug certification of the new drug in Germany. I know this will be easy for you. You give me your chips, and I will give you my price. It's a fair deal. No cheating. I don't believe in emotions." "Oh, really?" Grindelwald asked softly with a wicked smile, staring into his eyes. "Then, why did you pay that kid more than 2 gold galleons? What benefit did he bring you during your journey?" "I don't see anything materialistic about it. If you say that hug is worth 2 gold galleons, then I agree. You are spying on me." Karl's voice rose octaves, staring at the handsome old man in front of him. Then he turned around and waved his hand and said, "I think there's no need for us to continue this conversation. This kind of surveillance is absolutely unacceptable. Without trust between both parties, the transaction cannot be completed. You can do whatever you want now. I'm leaving now." After saying that, Cole pulled out a chair and prepared to leave, but just as he took a step, Grindelwald spoke slowly. "I didn't ask anyone to monitor you. It was my former members of the Saints. They took the initiative to monitor your every move. Don't forget your current identity. You are Dumbledore's adopted son, and will be his heir in the future. To my stupid subordinates, you are the biggest threat to the organization's future. They are monitoring you on their own initiative, and I don't have much to do about it. That's also why I asked you to complete my plan. The Saints organization seems to be somewhat out of control." "Really?" Karl turned his head and looked at Grindelwald half doubtfully. After rolling his eyes twice, he pretended to be embarrassed and said, "I believe what you said, but what does it have to do with me? Why should I help you complete your plan? I can't get any benefit from it. 15 castles across Europe, 6 hidden vaults, and organizational power throughout Europe and the United States. These are really not that great of a benefit, and I don't think you'd be tempted." Grindelwald crossed his arms and looked at Cole with a smug look on his face. Karl, who was about to leave, silently retracted his right leg, pulled out the chair, and sat down again. He took out a bottle of treasured Bordeaux red wine from his ring, opened the seal, and then took out 2 high-heeled glasses made of pure crystal. He poured 2 full glasses without decanting the wine, and said with a smile on his face, while handing one of the glasses to Grindelwald, "What are you talking about? Even if you only have 1 gold galleon left on your body, I can't refuse your request. Who told you to create me? Right? Why would we talk about money? It hurts our feelings. I just want to ask you something. Can the money in castle be transferred directly? Most of the money will not exist. It has been seized by the Ministry of Magic of various countries. You want me to launder the money? I'm not rejecting your kindness, but it will be more troublesome." Looking at the speed at which the boy's expression changed, Grindelwald couldn't help but sigh in his heart that he was truly better than his teacher. But since this kid is so aware of the current situation, there is no need to tease him anymore. So Grindelwald said calmly, "Don't worry, those castles and vaults are all legal and formal properties. Most of them used to belong to major pureblood families in Europe. After I founded the Saints, a large number of them donated most of their property to me personally. Although we failed half a century ago, I'm imprisoned by myself. No Ministry of Magic in any country has the power to arrest me. You are not even qualified to confiscate my property. Moreover, most of the members of my organization are currently serving as high-ranking officials in various European magical ministries." Hearing The smile on Carol's face became even wider, and he rubbed his hands excitedly, but in the midst of his excitement he thought about it for a moment. Then he immediately calmed down and asked more puzzledly, "That's not right. You have such a huge amount of wealth and such a wide network of contacts. How could there be any problems within the organization? With your prestige, is there anyone who dares to usurp the throne? That won't happen." Grindelwald shook the red wine in the glass, took a sip and said helplessly, "But the situation is indeed not optimistic. The reason is very simple. I'm already old. Even powerful wizards usually have a very long lifespan, but I'm at the end of my life now, and I'm not in the mood to think about these issues. I just want to spend the rest of my life slowly with my beloved, but before that, my ideals and my organization, we must find a suitable successor, so you must carry out my plan. I need a young successor, just like Karl Hohenzollern. I need a young man to inherit the bloodline." "Hey, I thought it was a big deal." Karl leaned back in his chair with a relaxed look on his face, drinking red wine, and said nonchalantly, "You just want me to play a double act with you." A Grindelwald heir appears in Europe, facing Dumbledore's heir who appears in Britain across the sea. The resurrection of a grudge from half a century ago is indeed very topical. I agree with your request. Then, what is the name of my identity? Considering that you are from Germany, Lundsnit, or Lucas, Felix or something like that would also be good. Looking at the excited boy in front of him, Grindelwald's wicked smile appeared on his face again, and he drank the red wine in the crystal glass. Then he leaned back in his chair like Karl, crossed his hands, shook his head and spoke softly. "Those names are really good, but of course they still have some shortcomings, mainly because they don't fit my identity. I've already thought of them. Your name is Theodora Grindelwald. What did you say?" Karl sprayed out the red wine he had just drunk. He looked at the handsome old man in front of him in disbelief, stood up suddenly and questioned, "But if I remember correctly, this should be a girl's name." Chapter 201 Hidden Mission: The Queen Who Rules the European Magical World. "Don't get so excited, kid." Grindelwald wiped the wine stains on his chest gracefully, although he had anticipated this and used isolation magic point, but he didn't expect Karl's reaction to be so excited, and a few drops of red wine still stuck to his cuffs. "How can I not be excited?" Karl began to act out his rage, jumping onto a chair and pointing at Grindelwald. "What do you want to do? I can help you with this double act, but don't use the dirty thoughts in your heart. You came to disgust me. You gave me that name. Do you want me to dress up as a woman?" When he finished speaking, there was still a hint of hope in Karl's tone point, but Grindelwald's next words completely killed that last glimmer of hope. He shrugged his shoulders and pretended to be helpless. "I can't help it, kid. You are too good. Everything you have done in the UK, including those trials, it has already caused a stir in the global wizarding community, but what has caused an even greater sensation is probably your face. My assessment of this face is that it is very close to Al's when he was young. You can imagine how much of an impression this will leave on others. Even if I can teach you my unique disguise magic, I don't think that magic can cover up your brilliance, so for the sake of confidentiality, it would be best to have a place where no one can question it. For example, my heir is an equally beautiful girl. I refuse." Karl refused bluntly. "I want to die in this castle today, outside by jumping out of the window. It is absolutely impossible to agree to such despicable, shameless, and dirty conditions. Congratulations to the host for triggering the hidden mission, the Queen Who Rules the European Magic World. I strongly recommend that the host accept this request. This will greatly improve the progress of the host taking over the Saints. Now the Saints takeover percentage bar is open, and every time it exceeds 10%, a god level reward will be given directly. After reaching 100%, a hidden reward will be triggered, and 150 million points will be directly awarded." Karl, who had just looked like he would never obey, was like a deflated ball, standing there awkwardly for a moment. After 3 minutes of silence, he frantically greeted the dog system in his mind. "What's wrong with you? I have already blocked you. Why did you trigger this kind of mission? Did you make some kind of deal with this old man?" to plot against me together? I will never yield to you, host. Please be careful with your words. You have never blocked me. The blocking magic in your mind is just like turning on silent mode on a cell phone, but when an important notification comes, how can I not allow a reminder? That would be my dereliction of duty. By the way, please note that this task is only released today. If the host does not accept it, the task will never be triggered. At the same time, 50 points will be deducted from the host as a penalty. Please consider this on your own. Think about your grandma's legs. Karl completely broke down and kept greeting the dog system with the sounds of birds and flowers. In reality, Grindelwald saw Karl standing there in a daze without saying a word, because the other party could not accept this reality for a while. After a brief thought, he explained from his own perspective. In fact, in addition to the reasons for keeping it secret that I mentioned, there is another reason that I think may be easier for you to accept. That is, if I appear in the organization as my successor as a man, it will cause some trouble. Most of them are emotional. After all, my subordinates are all getting old, but their families are very large. There are often girls your age, and then your marriage will become a very troublesome option. If you present yourself as a girl, at least until you turn 18, this problem won't exist. Also, considering your relationship with that senior, shut up and stop talking, you old bastard. Karl roared and roared, thinking hard. Finally, he was ready to agree to this shameful request, but before agreeing to the request, he looked at Lindover and said seriously, I can agree to your request, but I have a condition. The first is the certification of the drug. You must help me complete it immediately. No problem. Grindelwald rubbed his hands together, his face full of excitement. Karl glanced at this disrespectful old man, tried to calm himself down, and continued speaking. The second requirement is that regarding the property you mentioned earlier, a formal will must be drawn up after both of you pass away. Everything belongs to me. Of course, I will also fulfill my responsibilities in your later years. Of course. Grindelwald didn't care at all about the hope that Karl's tone could show that he wanted to die soon. He simply snapped his right fingers, and a huge piece of parchment immediately appeared on the table between the two of them. The contents of the will were written in standard Gothic font in both German and English. There was even this guy's name signed in the lower left corner, along with his blood. Looking at the parchment in front of him, Karl's eyes twitched wildly. He first took the feather pen that had been prepared beside him. Sign your name in the lower right corner. Use magic to cut your thumb and drip your own blood on your name. Then he suddenly looked at Grindelwald, who was smiling, and asked unexpectedly, the third question is, you want me to dress up as a woman? Is it because of the reason you mentioned before, or is it a trap you have set long ago? The ultimate purpose is just to get angry with a certain old bee. Of course, I'm angry with that old guy. Grindelwald said without any hesitation. That old guy had the nerve to show off the gift you gave him, the pink Harley Davidson and all that colorful paint on his head. I will never forget that tone of voice in my life. I must disgust this old guy. It was not until the last word was spoken that Grindelwald reacted and turned to look at Cole with some embarrassment. He was indeed a little too proud of himself. Being with this child gave him a long lost sense of relaxation and happiness, especially playing with your own children like this. Probably every father in the world likes to play a trick on his boys. The old man and the young man stared at each other for a long time. Finally, Karl put away the parchment and said with gritted teeth, "May you live long, my dear family, and call out your hidden makeup artist. I know you have prepared it." Chapter 202 Wenderosia. Don't act like I'm not a good person. Grindelwald looked at the compromising Karl. The smirk on his face never stopped, but his tone was still serious and proper. I'm only doing this for your sake. How could I possibly harm you? Everything I do is just for your future. Hearing the other party being so shameless and speaking in a tone of "this is all for your own good," Cole really wanted to slap this old man. But now that things have come to this, verbal competitiveness is no longer of much significance. After all, one cannot give up money for the sake of face. So he just sat there quietly, staring at Grindelwald with calm eyes. After a while, Grindelwald probably felt that it was boring and gradually put away his arrogant smile. He said as he stood up and prepared to leave, "Well, Since both parties have reached a deal, there is no need for me to say anything more. Please wait here for a while. Someone will be here soon to help you with your acupuncture clothes. I look forward to meeting you again, my dear daughter, Theodora. Grindelwald. After saying that, he teleported away to avoid Karl's angry kick, and then teleported directly to the door of the reception hall. He opened the door and walked outside, but then playfully put his head back into the living room, and pretended to be expectant. Those scumbags of the European wizarding world, prepare to greet your beautiful queen. Avada Kedavra. Carol couldn't help but cast a killing curse, but Grindelwald was faster, and closed the door of the living room almost instantly. The deadly green light hit the golden bronze gate, but did not cause any explosion. After a wave of magical ripples, the gate was safe and sound. Looking at the door in front of him, Karl couldn't help feeling a little surprised. At the same time, we have to admit that Grindelwald's strength is indeed extraordinary, and this castle alone can be called a priceless treasure. When he thought that the castle would be his property in the future, he finally felt better. If it weren't for the sake of a certain old bee, he had to play some insignificant role in the death of his nominal father. But now, all he had to do was wait, sitting alone in the empty living room, having just finished enjoying a cake. After the anger in his heart subsided, Karl couldn't help feeling sleepy, so he lay on the table and fell asleep. He didn't know how long it had been, but when he opened his eyes again, he saw a familiar figure in front of him. Aunt Wenda? Carol asked puzzledly. But just as he finished speaking, the right side of his face was pinched tightly by the elegant lady in front of him. I've told you so many times that the term auntie is not appropriate for any woman. Pay attention, little brat. Also, you and your partner went on a honeymoon, and even though you bought me a gift, you promised me that, will you come visit me during the summer vacation? And you come to Germany instead, you little brat. Wenda. Rosia pinched Karl's face and roared unceremoniously, gently. Karl, who was scolded badly, did not dare to say it, like he did to Dumbledore or Grindelwald. If he fought back directly with words like that, he could only beg for mercy while explaining, I was only planning to stay here for a while. I had already negotiated with that old guy. After he helped me get the German drug certificate, I was just going to go back to England. He changed his mind at the last minute. It's none of my business. What? Old thing. You should call him father. Wenda pinched Karl's face with even more force, and his expression became unusually serious. There can be no mistakes on this point, especially in the years ahead. When you appear in this capacity, there must be no mistakes in addressing him. You may not be able to imagine the prestige and status he holds in the Saints organization. I understand. Karl replied perfunctorily, but he was not convinced in his heart, thinking that when he was in England. Every wizard I met kept emphasizing to me the significance of Dumbledore to Hogwarts. This is of great significance to the entire British wizarding world, but in just 1 year, the old man was still being manipulated by himself at will. Although Grindelwald had tricked me first, there was still a long time to go. And I must find a way to get revenge. This is not because I'm petty, it's just that I simply don't like the other person. What bad ideas are you thinking of again? Wenda released his right hand that was pinching Karl's face, stared into his eyes and said helplessly, there's no need to lie to me. Every time you lie, you can't help but look down. You're just like him when he was young. He is a person who will not accept any constraints at all. Just looking at these eyes makes people feel suffocated. After saying this, perhaps it was because she saw Karl's Dumbledore-like eyes that reminded this lady of great temperament of some bad memories, or maybe it was simply because Karl's face felt so good. Wenda couldn't help but stretch out his left hand again. On the other side of Carol's face, he pinched it hard. Karl's cheeks were pinched red, and he could only sit on the chair with tears in his eyes, letting the lady play with him. After all, no child will reject his mother. You are quite sensible. After fully kneading Karl, Wenda felt satisfied and let him go. Then he picked up the 2 LV bags he was carrying and threw them on the open space on both sides of him. He took out the magic wand and lightly tapped it, and 2 LV bags immediately began to expand and deform. Two huge wardrobes and a complicated dressing table suddenly appeared in front of the two of them looking at the colorful dresses in front of me and the lipsticks whose colors I can't even tell. Karl couldn't help swallowing his saliva. He now felt a little regretful about why he invented this portable magic backpack. In the end, he even used it on himself. Seeing that he could not escape his fate, he tried to minimize the losses. He stretched out his hands and rubbed his red face hard, trying to make his face as round as possible. Then she tried hard to put on a watery look, looked at Wenderosia, and spoke in a sweet tone. Sister, there's no need to go through so much trouble. Just pick one at random. After all, if you really want me to play the role of Grindelwald's successor, then I must at least have an outstanding leadership temperament. What's up with that pink Lalita skirt? It doesn't match the image design. Wender seemed to have expected Karl's cuteness. He was happily choosing various cute little dresses from the closet beside him. At the same time, he suddenly turned around and looked at Karl, warning him ferociously, "Don't think about running away. When you were in the United States, didn't I also let you wear that kind of little skirt before you were 10 years old? Now is a good time for me to recall those beautiful moments." After that, Wenda took a pink Lalita dress, walked in front of Carol, and said with a wicked smile, "Let me begin with this one, my dear little Karl." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.